Chapter 1978, The Shi Emperor's Daughter, 1. Shiyu looked at the ninth prince with unconcealable rage and resentment. The ninth prince had brought on all of the disasters that the Tian Yuan clan faced today. Ninth prince, I want to kill you. Shiyu roared out furiously. She fused with her sword and stabbed at the ninth prince as hard as she could with the power she had gained from burning her vitality. The sword shone, illuminated the entire city. The attack was like a comet through the sky, shining with great resplendence. It bore the color of life burning away as it moved out like it was unstoppable. It possessed Shiyu's determination to kill. Seeing how Shiyu attacked the ninth prince, the god kings who had come with the ninth prince were all slightly stunned before revealing strange smiles. Scorn and disdain filled their smiles. The ninth prince was not like those wastrels from other large organizations, who only relied on their statuses to have their way, while their own strength was weak. He was not the type to put on a strong front to hide his weakness. In reality, the ninth prince was the most powerful and most terrifying person among them. He had reached the peak of God King and was already making preparations for his breakthrough to the primordial realm. Before an expert like that, even if a God King burned their life and soul, they would not be able to injure him, let alone a puny overgod. The ninth prince looked at Shiyu coldly as if he was a great lord looking at an ant. He did not make any unnecessary actions in response to the strike that Shiyu had put her life into. He only waved his hand gently like it was nothing, remaining composed. Immediately, the surroundings changed. The ninth prince's seemingly unserious movement possessed overwhelming power. At that moment, he was like the ruler of the world, where he could destroy the entire place with a simple raise of his hand. Before Shiyu could even approach the ninth prince, she sensed an irresistible force surge over. Before it, she felt like she was a tiny boat in the great ocean, so insignificant and fragile. Crack! The sword in Shiyu's hand directly shattered and it came in contact with the force from the ninth prince. It turned into countless shards as a terrifying force passed through her arm, ramming into her body heavily. Spurt! Shiyu puked out a mouthful of blood and organs that sprayed into the sky. It dyed the entire place red. Shiyu was blown away like a broken kite. As she was knocked back, her right hand that held her sword had already turned into a bloody mess, where even her bones had turned to dust. Afterwards, her entire right arm actually fell apart rapidly in the air. It vanished bit by bit. A short while later, Shiyu's right arm had completely vanished, only leaving a bloody pile behind. Shiyu was knocked very far away. She only struck the ground heavily after slamming into the spatial barrier that trapped the important members of the Tian Yuan clan. Blood constantly spurted from her mouth. Her presence completely dipped at that moment. It withered away. She was now at death's door. Behind her, the hair on Shiyu's foster father, Mo Xingfeng, had already become snow white. He stared at Shiyu, who had collapsed on the ground, as his eyes were completely bloodshot. They were filled with grief. Although Shiyu was not his true daughter, he had still raised her from a young age after all. They were so close that they were like true father and daughter. However, the God King who used the laws of space had completely trapped him there, utterly immobilized. There was nothing he could do at this moment. A pained voice rang out, and Nubi's skull had already been punctured. The God King had forcefully extracted his soul. At the same time, the spatial compression around Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu had already reached their limits. They bled from all their facial orifices while the bones across their bodies cracked audibly. Only Sacred Feather continued to endure the pressure painfully. The three of them gritted their teeth and endured with their great willpower. They used all their strength to summon the origin energy armor they had brought up from the lower world. However, it was still useless. The armor instantly became covered with cracks under the compression of space before shattering into pieces. The ninth prince watched this happen coldly. He said, "I'll give you 3 seconds. Contact your patriarch and tell him to return, or tell me who the primordial realm expert behind Jian Chen is and where she is. I can give you a quick death if you do that. Or, the ninth prince glanced across the people of the Tian Yuan clan coldly, and he said with killing intent, I'll make you come begging for death. Shi Yu raised her head and stared at the ninth prince in resentment. She said weakly, if you want to kill us, then kill us. We will never contact the patriarch. However, I can guarantee you that if you destroy our Tian Yuan clan, our patriarch will destroy your entire empire in revenge in the future. Shi Yu spoke stubbornly, choosing to die rather than to yield. The ninth prince's gaze turned cold. He extended a hand and brought Shi Yu over. He gripped her neck as he held her in the air and said, You sure have some pride. However, there are always times where the prouder a person is, the more miserable their outcome is. The ninth prince glanced behind him and said, Mo Yen, aren't you the most skilled in methods of harvesting yin to replenish your yang? I'll grant this woman to you right now. Treat her well. With that, the ninth prince directly tossed Shi Yu over. Behind the ninth prince, there were still two other god kings who did not take part in the battle. When they saw the ninth prince toss Shi Yu over, a nefarious light immediately flickered through the eyes of one of them. He picked up Shi Yu with his arms, and he snickered, Your Highness is wise. To kill such a beautiful woman would be quite a pity. I'll follow your Highness' orders and treat this woman well. Don't you dare. Shi Yu's face changed when she heard their conversation. Determination filled her eyes as she wanted to blow herself up. However, Mo Yen only pointed at Shi Yu gently and sealed up all her cultivation, severing her thoughts of blowing herself up. Then, he sniggered, Little beauty, you can't die so soon. You've cultivated for all these years, but you must not have enjoyed the feeling of being loved by a man, right? But don't worry, it'll happen very soon. You'll understand the joys of being loved by a man. You'll never forget the lovely feeling. Ha 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 ha. With that, Mo Yen began to gently strip away Shi Yu's bloodied clothes before everyone. He did not move quickly. Instead, it was extremely slow. The nefarious light in his eyes shone brighter and brighter. This sight utterly enraged all the people of the Tian Yuan clan. However, they were all powerless against the ninth prince and his god kings. They could not even protect themselves. However, the space 1,000 meters above the Tian Yuan clan suddenly rippled like water. With the rippling, a few people appeared in the empty space. Chapter 1979, The Shi Emperor's Daughter, 2. At the very front of the group was a middle-aged man. He wore dragon robes while his resolute face gave off an undeniable sense of dignity. Even though his presence was completely concealed, he seemed to be treading on top of the world as he appeared. Behind the middle-aged man were two women. One seemed to be in her 30s. She was graceful and charming, and she also possessed a sense of dignity. However, worry and excitement filled her face. The other woman only seemed to be in her 20s. She was beautiful and gave off a noble presence as if she led a luxurious life. People could tell that she possessed an extraordinary birth with just a single glance. Behind them were two ruddy old men. They concealed their presences such that no one was able to sense their existence, much less see through their cultivation. The group consisted of the Shi Emperor and the others who had hurried over a tremendous distance from the northern region. As soon as they arrived in the air above the Tian Yuan clan, the Shi Emperor and the Empress looked down. Although many people had gathered in the Tian Yuan clan today, both of them were primordial realm experts, and the Shi Emperor had even reached chaotic prime. As a result, as soon as they arrived, there was a calling of their bloodline that clearly appeared in their hearts. The couple's feelings surged from the calling, and following it, their eyes locked onto Shi Yu. However, when they saw what was happening, the couple became utterly enraged. Their eyes became extremely bloodshot at that moment, and killing intent erupted like a tsunami. The world darkened as the sun in the sky trembled. Suddenly, the temperature of the entire divine kingdom of Pingtian plummeted. The divine king and the vice-leader of the Empyrean demon cult remained engaged in an extremely intense battle in outer space. However, when they sensed the terrifying killing intent that frightened even them, they could not help but stop and look towards the Dong'an province. Chaotic Prime. The divine king and Huaiyan both cried out. They became stern. A chaotic prime had appeared in the southern region and in the Dong'an province of the divine kingdom of Pingtian in particular. The divine king was unable to remain calm about this, so he immediately rushed back to the divine kingdom of Pingtian. He no longer bothered about keeping Huaiyan busy. On the tallest peak of the 3,000 spiritual mountains within the Earth Spirit sect, the eyes of the ancestor, Sang Tu, suddenly snapped open. Surprise filled his face as he looked in the direction of the divine kingdom of Pingtian grimly. What a powerful killing intent. This killing intent originates from a chaotic prime. Is it that woman? Sang Tu became extremely stern. Now that a chaotic prime had suddenly appeared in the divine kingdom of Pingtian, he subconsciously connected it to the woman in white clothes who had infiltrated his secret room silently. No, it's not her. The presences differ too much. Just which expert has come to the divine kingdom of Pingtian, and why is his killing intent so strong? Sang Tu could no longer remain where he was. Immediately, he hurried off to the divine kingdom of Pingtian. At the same time, this matter also alarmed the primordial realm experts of the imperial family of the Heavenly Moon Empire and the Taoist sect of Calm Clouds that stood equal to the Earth Spirit sect. They all emerged from seclusion and hurried off to the divine kingdom of Pingtian. A chaotic prime had appeared in the divine kingdom of Pingtian. This was a significant matter, so they had to investigate. The killing intent that had suddenly appeared in the Tian Yuan clan also made the ninth prince's face change drastically. Suddenly, he looked at the sky as disbelief filled his face. He felt his soul tremble before the killing intent. The killing intent was so powerful that it was enough to annihilate the surroundings. It made the ninth prince feel like his soul had frozen over. Since even a peak god king like the ninth prince experienced that, what happened to the god kings who had come with the ninth prince was obvious. Fright filled all of their faces. Mo Yen stopped stripping Shiyu's clothes. As if a cold bucket of water had been poured over him, his nefarious flames were completely extinguished. You are. The Shi Emperor and the Empress both cried out sorrowfully. The Shi Emperor directly sent out a palm strike that contained terrifying energy towards Mo Yen. A chaotic prime strike created just too great of a disturbance. It was world-shaking. The Shi Emperor's furious strike directly annihilated space, creating black spatial cracks in the sky that spread towards Mo Yen at a speed greater than lightning. From the distance, a black crack seemed to stretch towards the ground. It was like a black streak of lightning. The ninth prince and the other god kings felt like they were suffocating at that moment. Their hearts throbbed heavily as all the hairs on their bodies stood up. They felt a chill run down their spines, from their heads to their feet. Chaotic Prime. The ninth prince lost his composure. His face changed drastically, and he immediately pressed his hand onto his space ring. A jade talisman laid quietly in a corner of his space ring. It had been crushed to dust silently at that moment. Mo Yen had been silently reduced to nothingness. He disappeared from the air, and not even a single dust particle remained. Only the shattered space that slowly closed up remained where he stood before. A mighty god king had just vanished before everyone like that. Had he been reduced to the simplest particles from the Shi Emperor's strike, or had the crack in space sucked him away? However, it was certain that even if Mo Yen was a god king, it was impossible for him to survive a furious strike from a chaotic prime that also contained killing intent. The Shi Emperor's control over his power was extremely great. His furious attack only targeted Mo Yen such that no energy surged out. As a result, his attack resulted in no energy shockwaves, and it also failed to reach anyone in the surroundings. Not even the surroundings were damaged. However, the pressure and terrifying disturbance the attack caused mentally shocked everyone present. You are. The Shi Emperor silently appeared before Shi Yu. His stalwart body trembled uncontrollably as tears filled his eyes. He called out emotionally. My daughter. My daughter, mother has finally found you. Mother has finally found you. The Empress ignored the blood on Shi Yu and embraced her tightly. She began to sob as tears flowed from her eyes uncontrollably like a fountain. She was unable to stop crying. She had just found her beloved daughter that had been lost for many years. It should have been something delightful, but when she saw her own flesh and blood end up in such a miserable state, her heart shattered. When she thought about how her own daughter would be completely doomed if she arrived just a little later, the Empress became filled with angst. Who did this? Who injured my daughter like this? The Empress said through gritted teeth, emphasizing every single word. Fury filled her eyes, and just a single, terrifying glance from them was enough to make people shiver. Chapter 1980, The Shi Emperor's Daughter, 3. The Shi Emperor also surged with killing intent. His face became extremely sunken as he gently placed his hand on Shi Yu's shoulder. Tremendous vitality parted from his body, entering Shi Yu's body in an extremely gentle way. With the channeling of the vitality, Shi Yu, who had been at death's door, regained life in a short instance. Some color appeared in her dull eyes while her wounds quickly healed as well. Even her right arm that had been destroyed began to regrow. The severed arm was healing. After all, this was the tremendous vitality of a chaotic prime. This vitality was nothing to a chaotic prime, but to Shi Yu, who was only an over-god, this was a power that could change her fate. It basically gave her a second life. Princess Tian and the two old men who had followed along also descended onto the Tian Yuan clan. At that moment, they stared at Shi Yu in shock. Princess Tian looked at the bloodied Shi Yu in the Empress embrace. The feelings she experienced were extremely mixed. If she had known earlier that the box Jian Chen had given her was a lead to her aunt's long-lost daughter, she would have forcefully given it to the Empress regardless of the consequences. I can't believe Jian Chen. Why didn't he directly explain such an important thing to me? If I could tell elder sister's whereabouts earlier, she would not end up like this. Princess Tian was very displeased with Jian Chen. As for the two old men who had come with the Shi Emperor, they experienced shock and disbelief. In the Shi Empire, everyone already knew that the Shi Emperor had no children. This was a public fact. However, the Shi Emperor had suddenly gained a daughter now, which surprised the two of them very much. At this moment, the Divine King had arrived in the Tian Yuan clan as well. He concealed his presence and maintained an extremely low profile, so low that barely anyone sensed his arrival. However, when he understood the situation, he knew how to behave and remained quiet. He watched on from one side, looking at the couple and the two old men sternly. He was nowhere near calm inside. He did not know who they were, but he did know that any single one of them possessed a cultivation level that greatly exceeded his own. The arrival of a chaotic prime had utterly terrified the God King, who could control space already. His face paled, and he was no longer in the mood to deal with the people from the Tian Yuan clan. He immediately released the trapped space. The important members of the Tian Yuan clan recovered their freedom, including Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu. All of them felt like they had just escaped death. However, when they looked at Shi Yu, who the Empress embraced, none of them said anything. They were also stunned. The original patriarch of the Mo clan, Mo Xingfeng, experienced extremely mixed feelings as he looked at the Emperor and the Empress. As for the ninth prince of the Blood Sun Empire, he had become unsettled. He studied the Emperor and the Empress carefully. However, his gaze was fixed on the dragon robes that the Shi Emperor wore. Dragon robes and a chaotic prime. Is he, As a person who possessed authority in the Blood Sun Empire, the ninth prince was naturally knowledgeable. He completely exceeded the divine king in this aspect, so he quickly guessed the Shi Emperor's identity, which caused his heart to sink. Impossible. Doesn't the Shi Emperor of the northern region have no children? Why is there a daughter now? And the daughter is, the ninth prince's face became extremely ugly. The light in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. With his quick thoughts, he made a decision and began to back off silently. He wanted to leave without drawing any attention to himself. No one can leave before I properly investigate if there's anyone else involved in my daughter's wounds. However, just when the ninth prince moved, the Empress' cold voice rang out, and pressure immediately fell on the ninth prince. The ninth prince's body sank. Under the tremendous pressure, his legs directly sank into the ground, leaving only his knees visible. Seeing how leaving silently would no longer work, the ninth prince could only raise his two hands with his full strength reluctantly now that he had run out of choices. He clasped his fist, "I am the ninth prince of the Blood Sun Empire, and I greet the Shi Emperor and the Empress. It really is an honor for our southern region to have you personally visit. If there are any places I can help, I am more than willing to." The Shi Emperor? Empress? The divine king was startled inside. The ninth prince's identity had already surprised him enough, but when the ninth prince mentioned the Shi Emperor and the Empress, he directly connected it to the eternal Shi Empire of the northern region. The Shi Emperor? Is the chaotic prime in dragon robes the current emperor of the eternal Shi Empire of the north? Even with the divine king's composure, he struggled to remain calm at this moment. He looked at Shiyu, who laid in the Empress' embrace, and was extremely shocked. However, after the Shi Emperor and the Empress learnt who the ninth prince was, they still did not budge. The Empress stared at the ninth prince coldly and said, "Are you among the people who injured my daughter?" The Empress' voice was filled with killing intent, such that people believed without any doubt that even if he was the ninth prince of the eternal Blood Sun Empire, she would still be bold enough to kill him. The ninth prince's face did not change. He clasped his fist, "You are mistaken, Empress. The Emperor has already dealt with the person who injured your daughter. I am congratulating the Emperor and the Empress for your reunion with your daughter. Don't lie. The person who injured Shiyu and destroyed her arm was clearly you." Just when the ninth prince had finished speaking, Shiyu's foster father, Mo Xingfeng, said furiously from among the crowd. "Humph, don't you tell dirty lies. If the Tian Yuan clan dares to slander me any further, I can wipe out your entire clan with a single word with my authority. Even the divine kingdom of Ping Tian won't be able to save you." The ninth prince's eyes turned cold, and he glared at Mo Xingfeng extremely sharply. The glance was like a sword, directly stabbing into Mo Xingfeng's soul, making him tremble violently and pale instantly. "How imposing!" The Empress snorted coldly. She held Shiyu with one hand as she directly swung her other hand at the ninth prince. She condensed a hand of energy that slapped the ninth prince's face viciously, sending him flying. The slap was extraordinarily powerful. Half of the ninth prince's face had been reduced to a bloody mess while his entire jaw had been shattered. Blood covered his face. The ninth prince and his mighty cultivation of peak God King only seemed like an infant before the Empress. He was unable to resist at all. The souls of all the people from the Tian Yuan clan were extremely shocked from that. Previously, they had used the power of their entire clan, yet they failed to resist at all before the ninth prince's people. They could only watch disaster descend. Yet now, the ninth prince and all his people who were so powerful that they could easily destroy the entire Tian Yuan clan in their eyes was as weak as a child before the Empress. All the people from the Tian Yuan clan felt like they were dreaming when they witnessed this dramatic change in the situation. The Empress knelt on the ground with one knee as she held Shiyu. Shiyu's blood had already dyed her clothes red. The Empress stared at the ninth prince that she had sent flying with killing intent, and she said frigidly, "Is that true? Did Yuer's wounds really come from you? Did you really destroy Yuer's arm? At that moment, Xiu had finally recovered after receiving the tremendous vitality of a chaotic prime. Her missing arm had regrown as well. She struggled and escaped from the Empress' embrace before standing up. She stared at the Empress and the Emperor in confusion. The Empress immediately looked at Xiu, and her glare softened instantly. A motherly light filled her eyes as she asked in concern, "Child, how do you feel?" "Yuer, tell father who injured you. It doesn't matter who they are or what status they possess, I'll take revenge for you. I won't let any of them go." The Shi Emperor supported Xiu carefully with one of his strong, robust arms. His eyes were gentle, and they were also filled with care. Xiu gently broke free from the Shi Emperor's arm and looked at the Emperor and the Empress in confusion. She slowly staggered backwards as she said gently, "Who are you?" I don't know you." When the Shi Emperor and the Empress heard Xiu's last sentence, the plain voice had instead made the two primordial realm experts shudder inside. Evident sorrow filled their faces. When the Shi Emperor and the Empress heard Xiu's last sentence, the plain voice had instead made the two primordial realm experts shudder inside. Evident sorrow filled their faces. The Shi Emperor was a vicious person who had created storms of blood and had personally killed half of the primordial realm experts in his empire. He was a cold-blooded emperor who even turned against his brothers. Yet, his face was filled with an indescribable bitterness right now. His arm remained extended in the posture where he supported Xiu before. It seemed to be frozen there. His beloved daughter's previous words were like a needle, deeply piercing the Shi Emperor's heart with pain. Tears welled up in the eyes of the Shi Emperor. They seemed to roll down the cheeks of the Emperor famed for his cold-bloodedness uncontrollably. His stalwart body trembled slightly as he stared at Xiu in utter pain. He opened his mouth slightly as if he wanted to explain something. However, when he saw the marks of blood on his daughter, he failed to say anything. "Child, I'm your mother, the mother who gave birth to you. This is your father connected to you by blood." The Empress broke out into tears. She charged over and embraced Xiu tightly regardless of anything. She held her very tightly, where Xiu was unable to break free at all. It was as if her daughter would vanish from her if she let go. At that moment, she was no longer the great empress of the Shi Empire, nor was she a peak expert who had reached the primordial realm. She was only a mother with a fragile heart. By now, crowds had already formed around the Tian Yuan clan. The primordial realm experts of the Heavenly Moon Empire had arrived as well. They stood with the Divine King, conversing secretly to ask about the situation here. However, the surroundings were extraordinarily quiet even though so many people had gathered around. They all watched on silently as they were in turmoil inside. The ninth prince who the Empress had sent flying did not dare to make any sounds at all. He looked at the Empress who sobbed while embracing Xiu and the heartbroken Shi Emperor beside her. He felt bitter inside. He would have never thought that the over-god he randomly came across in the Tian Yuan clan when he came looking for the person who had taken his flower of ways would actually be the princess of the Shi Empire of the North. Moreover, this princess had almost died to his hands. At this moment, the ninth prince experienced deep regret. He also felt extremely victimized. If he had known that Xiu was the only daughter of the current emperor of the Shi Empire earlier, he would have never touched a hair on her even if he were 100 times bolder. Although the Blood Sun Empire was just like the Shi Empire, a ruler of an entire region, the current emperor of the Blood Sun Empire, the ninth prince's father, had many children. He was only one of the many children under the emperor. If the interests of the empire were truly threatened, his status as prince could be removed at any time. However, Xiu was the only daughter of the Shi Emperor. Moreover, from the emotions the Shi Emperor and the Empress had shown, there was no doubt that they were willing to give up everything for their daughter. Xiu was unable to break free from the Empress' embrace no matter what, so she just gave up. She allowed herself to be embraced like that. It was just that she clearly struggled to accept these people who had suddenly said they were her parents. She resisted instinctively. No, no. You're not my parents. I don't have parents. I only have a foster father. Xiu shook her head gently. She spoke very softly, but tears welled up in her eyes. The Empress looked at Xiu gently, and she used her right hand to wipe away the blood on Xiu's face softly. The blood had already dyed the Empress white, soft hands red. She said with a trembling voice, "Dumb child, don't say dumb things. When mother and father abandoned you, we had no other choice either. Mother knows you resent us, and mother also knows that you cannot forgive us. But since we found you now, mother will use the rest of her life to properly make it up to you." The Shi Emperor also walked over. He sighed gently, "It has been tough for you in the past few years. It's just like what your mother said. When we abandoned you in the past, it was all to protect you. I'll explain the exact reason later. Right now, tell father just who else has harassed you among the people here? I'll help you deal with them." The expressions of the 9th prince and his henchmen all changed when they heard the Shi Emperor's words. Even though they were all god kings, they could not help but tremble inside. The 9th prince secretly panicked. He had already sent a message, but his father still had not come. He had no doubts that the Shi Emperor would kill him without any hesitation if the Blood Sun Empire still did not send any people. He would not take his status into account at all. After all, the Shi Emperor was famed for his viciousness and brutality. This time, Xiu finally broke free from the Empress' embrace. When she thought about the current situation of the Tian Yuan clan, Xiu immediately jumped slightly. She stopped wondering if the people before her were her parents immediately and quickly looked around. Nubis! Suddenly, Xiu cried out and arrived beside Nubis with a single step. Nubis currently laid on the ground with his eyes widened. The top of his skull had shattered, and his soul had been removed. Xiu became furious. Fuming hatred filled her eyes, and she said painfully, "Why, you've killed Nubis." Nubis was a close friend of Jian Chen. Xiu had no idea how sad Jian Chen would become once he heard that Nubis was dead. The god king who had taken Nubis' soul immediately paled. He added in a hurry, "No. Your Highness, please don't jump to conclusions. He's not dead. His soul is here." The God King's attitude had undergone a complete reversal. Before he had even finished speaking, he took out Nubis' soul in a hurry. He passed it in front of Xiu carefully as uneasiness filled his eyes. At that moment, his arms, and even his entire body shook gently. He was filled with fright. Nubis' soul was fine. Once he broke free, he immediately returned to his body. However, his body was severely injured, so he seemed extremely weak right now. Yener, suddenly, Mo Xingfeng's sorrowful voice rang out. Only when she heard her foster father's sorrowful calls did Xiu remember that Mo Yen had been standing in the crowd before. Even deities would struggle to endure the compression of space, so Mo Yen with her Saint Emperor cultivation was. When she thought up to there, Xiu's face became extremely pale in a single instance. She rushed past everyone as quickly as she could. However, when she arrived there, she could not find Mo Yen at all. All she saw was a heap of blood and flesh with ripped cloth scattered in between it. It was the clothes that Mo Yen liked to wear the most. Mo Xingfeng currently knelt before the pile of flesh and blood. He was grief-stricken. The sight roared through Xiu's head like a bolt of lightning. It stunned her instantly, and she began to totter heavily, almost falling to the ground. She had already become extremely pale. Xiu fell onto her bottom as she stared at the pile of indistinguishable blood and flesh. Her mind was about to collapse as tears flowed down her cheeks uncontrollably. Yener, Xiu murmured subconsciously. She could not help but think of the mischievous, energetic girl of the past. She was heartbroken. She and Mo Yen were so close that it was not something anyone else could understand. It could even be said that Mo Yen was the person closest to her in the world. She was even more attached to Mo Yen than her foster father, Mo Xingfeng. At this moment, the Shi Emperor and the Empress made their way over. The Shi Emperor glanced at the pile of flesh before squatting down beside Shi Yu. He placed his hand on her shoulder and comforted her. Don't worry and don't feel sad. Father's here. The Shi Emperor spoke very softly, but his voice was powerful and filled with deep confidence. It was like there were very few things in the world that he could not do or resolve. The Shi Emperor spoke very softly, but his voice was powerful and filled with deep confidence. It was like there were very few things in the world that he could not do or resolve. The light in Shi Yu's eyes immediately returned when she heard the Shi Emperor's words, as her mind almost collapsed. As if she had seen a sliver of light in the darkness, she looked at the striking, middle-aged man in dragon robes. She asked in a hurry, can you really save Yenner? The Shi Emperor looked at Shi Yu and said, since the person called Yenner is so important to you, I'll make her appear before you again regardless of the price. As long as you can be happy, I will do anything for you. Shi Emperor. When the two old men who had followed along heard the Shi Emperor's words, they immediately became alarmed. They wanted to warn him. However, just when they were about to say something, the Shi Emperor raised his hand to shut them up. The two old men looked at each other. The Shi Emperor was the current emperor of the Shi Empire. A qualified emperor would never place too much importance on his personal affairs. He would work towards the interests of the empire for everything. He would even give up on his children at crucial times. However, the Shi Emperor did not value the interests of the empire at all. Instead, he did everything for his daughter. He could even say that he would do anything for his daughter. As the person in charge of an eternal empire, they definitely could not say something like that. They could not even consider it. The silent divine king and the primordial realm experts of the heavenly moon empire nearby were experiencing internal turmoil. Some of them even looked at Shi Yu in envy. In the lands of the Cloud Plain, would there still be any person bold enough to provoke the lady called Shi Yu, seeing how she could get the emperor of an eternal empire, a chaotic prime, to make a promise like that? Senior, can you really save Yenner? Mo Xingfeng stared at the Shi Emperor as he asked with a trembling voice. The Shi Emperor nodded. Although her soul is gone, fortunately, she's not very powerful, and her soul hasn't completely dispersed either. It has been scattered in this space with some fragments remaining. All you need is a radiant God King who has condensed the 7 colored flowers to save her. And my empire just happens to have a radiant God King. With that, the Shi Emperor formed a seal with his hand. He sent off an edict into the air, which flew towards the Shi Empire of the northern region. Thank you for saving my daughter, Senior. Thank you. Mo Xingfeng was overjoyed as he expressed his gratitude several times. Shi Yu also let out a breath of relief now that Mo Yen could be revived. Afterwards, she looked at the 9th prince and his god kings. Fury immediately sprang up in her eyes, and she said through gritted teeth, the disaster of the clan was all caused by them. All of them should die. The Empress looked at Shi Yu and nodded lovingly. Then, she looked at the 9th prince and his people, and her eyes immediately turned cold. With a flash, the Empress arrived before a god king who followed the 9th prince. She directly extended a slender finger towards him, sealing up all his cultivation instantly. Then, she tossed him before Shi Yu like he was a dead dog. From the start till the end, the God King did nothing. This was because the difference in strength was just far too great. Before the Empress, he was like an ant. I never thought the Empress' strength would be unfathomable as well. She's at the 6th heavenly layer at the very least. The Divine King and the Primordial Realm experts of the Heavenly Moon Empire all jumped inside when they saw the Empress move. The Empress continued, capturing all the other God Kings the Ninth Prince had brought with him. She tossed them all before Xiyu. Even the Ninth Prince of exalted status, known to be the most likely successor of the current Emperor, was not spared. The Empress mercilessly sealed up his cultivation and tossed him before Xiyu. The Ninth Prince's face became extremely ugly. He growled, "Your Majesty, I am a prince of the Blood Sun Empire. If you treat me like this, it'll affect the relationship between our Blood Sun Empire and your Xi Empire. You're too noisy." The Empress called out coldly and slapped the Ninth Prince again, striking his other cheek. The slap sent the Ninth Prince flying once again while his other cheek had become bloody as well. His face was no longer distinguishable. Moreover, the bottom half of his skull had shattered to pieces. However, the Empress treated it like it was nothing. She did not even glance at the Ninth Prince after doing that. Instead, she turned around to look at Xiyu and said gently and caringly, "These people can't resist anymore. Do you want Mother to avenge you, or do you want to deal with them yourself?" Xiyu said nothing. She stared at the God Kings furiously as the arrogant, condescending scenes of the God Kings flashed through her head clearly. Killing intent immediately filled her eyes. She absolutely resented these God Kings. If it were not for the timely arrival of the Xi Emperor and the Empress, the entire Tian Yuan clan would have probably been slaughtered. As a result, she wanted to deal with the God Kings personally. Xiyu brought her hands forwards and a strand of resplendent sword qi gradually appeared between her hands. She stabbed it towards one of them. "Calm yourself, Xi Emperor. Please show mercy." At this moment, an ancient voice rang out in the sky. It was thunderous, and it rolled through the surroundings and lingered for a long time. Space distorted in the sky, and a few figures suddenly appeared. At the very front were two ruddy old men. They concealed their presences, so they seemed like ordinary people, making it completely impossible to see through their cultivation. However, as they stood there, the world around them seemed to pale and dull. Behind the two old men was a middle-aged man in dragon robes. He appeared to be dignified and seemed to be somewhat similar to the Ninth Prince. This was the Emperor of the Blood Sun Empire, known as the Blood Emperor by others. A few experts of the imperial family had come along as well, standing behind the Blood Emperor. At the same time, in the distant north, 3 ancient stone towers quietly stood in the forbidden grounds of the Xi Empire. The stone towers were not tall, but they seemed like they were connected with the world. Extremely powerful laws revolved around the surroundings of each stone tower. Haoshuan, Haoming, go visit the southern region. Our Xi Empire can't lose in terms of impression no matter what. At this moment, an ancient voice rang out from one of the stone towers. Ancestral Emperor, Ziyun's long-lost daughter, an ancient voice also rang out from another stone tower. "She has been found," said the person in the first stone tower. "Been found?" Finally. During all these years, Ziyun has almost gone insane for his daughter. He is finally able to get this off his chest. The person in the second stone tower exhaled deeply as if he could finally relax. The situation is rather complicated. With Ziyun's temperament, he'll probably cause quite the trouble. The two of you need to go this time so our Xi Empire doesn't lose in terms of impression, but you also need to stop Ziyun from causing trouble that can't be dealt with. "Go," the voice in the first stone tower rang out. "Yes, Ancestral Emperor." The people in the other 2 towers responded. With that, the presences of the 2 stone towers suddenly changed, and the towers immediately became seemingly simple. The powerful laws that revolved around them had completely vanished. The towers were already empty. The Ninth Prince who the Empress had sent flying with a single slap finally stopped worrying when he saw the Blood Emperor and the 2 old men who stood in front of the Blood Emperor arrive on time. He rose up and flew behind the Blood Emperor as quickly as he could, as if he had just been spared. The ninth prince, who the Empress had sent flying with a single slap, finally stopped worrying when he saw the Blood Emperor and the two old men who stood in front of the Blood Emperor arrive on time. He rose up and flew behind the Blood Emperor as quickly as he could, as if he had just been spared. However, even though the reinforcements of the Blood Sun Empire had come, the ninth prince still seemed like he was fleeing for his life from how hurriedly he behaved. It was like the Shi Emperor or the Empress would stop him if he were slightly slower. Greetings to father, to the two ancestral emperors. The ninth prince behaved extremely politely as he said all these words with great difficulty. After enduring 2 slaps from the Empress, his entire jaw had been destroyed, so his words were no longer audible. The Blood Emperor stood dignified. He glanced at the ninth prince emotionlessly, without showing any care. Instead, he said in a sharp, deep voice, "Stand behind us." He spoke firmly and decisively. Yes. The ninth prince answered politely, but his heart felt very heavy. He knew that after what had happened here today, he was no longer as important to his father as before. This filled him with bitterness. All he wanted to do was find the primordial realm expert who had stolen his flower of ways, but he had never thought that he would create such a big mess, even alarming the ancestral emperors of the empire. The Shi Emperor looked at the 2 ancestral emperors emotionlessly. His gaze was cold. He said, "You've finally come. That'll save me a trip to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. But regarding the mercy I should show, who exactly should I show it to? Is it these god kings? Or the prince who had almost killed my daughter? Or should I show mercy to your Blood Sun Empire?" The Shi Empire spoke icily, his voice filled with heavy killing intent. He was still extremely domineering even before the 2 ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire. The 2 ancestral emperors remained calm against the Shi Emperor's forceful words. One of them said, "Please calm down, Shi Emperor. We roughly understand the cause of this matter. This is indeed our fault, but fortunately, the matter hasn't developed into a big mistake. Our Blood Sun Empire will compensate your beloved daughter for her injuries, so we hope the Shi Emperor can be the bigger person and not stoop as low as this junior." The Shi Emperor's face sank suddenly. Killing intent shone in his eyes as he called out coldly, "When I came here, Yuer had already lost an arm. She was extremely heavily injured, and she was at death's door. Moreover, the people of your Blood Sun Empire wanted to force yourself onto her whilst she was so heavily injured. Is that not a big mistake? Or are you saying that it's not a big mistake once Yuer dies?" The more the Shi Emperor spoke, the more furious he became. At that moment, he was like an aggravated lion. He wanted blood. The expressions of the 2 ancestral emperors did not change. They looked at the Shi Emperor calmly. One of them flipped their hand, and immediately, a droplet of green liquid appeared. It gave off a mysterious pulse. Everyone's soul trembled with the appearance of the liquid. Indescribable comfort welled up in the depths of their souls as if their souls were being strengthened. Even the Divine King and the primordial realm experts of the Heavenly Moon Empire experienced the same thing. The pulses that the liquid gave off could actually affect infinite primes. That seems to be spiritual essence of starry skies. An infinite prime from the imperial family of the Heavenly Moon Empire called out. Spiritual essence of starry skies was stuff of legends to these infinite primes. The future accomplishments of a cultivator and how far they would manage to climb with cultivation was mostly related to their talent and affinity for comprehension. The affinity for comprehension was especially important. Along the path of cultivation, comprehending battle skills, comprehending the mysteries of the world, and grasping the laws of the world were all related to a person's affinity for comprehension. The greater their affinity, the faster they would be able to comprehend battle skills, and the easier they would understand the laws of the world. In the vast saints' world, there were countless people stuck at reciprocity. They were clearly only a step away from godhood, but they would never be able to take this step in their lifetime. This would not be caused by a lack of talent, but rather a lack of affinity for comprehension. They would never be able to grasp the laws of the world and obtain the key to godhood. After reaching godhood, each realm of cultivation required a corresponding amount of comprehension for the laws of the world. This was more than enough to demonstrate just how important the affinity for comprehension was for cultivation. However, the spiritual essence of starry skies just happened to be an absolute treasure that could increase a person's affinity for comprehension. It could even tempt infinite primes. This was because the increase in affinity the spiritual essence of starry skies brought was not temporary, unlike how comprehension T only increased comprehension for a certain time frame. It was permanent. If a droplet of spiritual essence of starry skies was given to someone with poor talent, it would make their affinity for comprehension shocking, turning them into a complete prodigy. She Emperor, you should understand the value of this droplet of spiritual essence of starry skies. May I ask if this is enough to resolve your grievances? An ancestral emperor asked. However, the She Emperor did not waver at all. He said coldly, the injuries to you cannot be compensated by anything. Debts of blood must be repaid with blood. The She Emperor spoke confidently, without any hesitation at all. Then, he turned to look at Shi Yu and said, do it. Kill these god kings. I'd like to see who dares to stop it. Towards the end, a powerful presence radiated from the She Emperor, crushing down on the two ancestral emperors in an overwhelming manner. The two ancestral emperors who had remained calm for the entire time finally changed in expression slightly. They frowned faintly. The Blood Emperor behind them glanced at the ninth prince slightly. A sliver of coldness appeared in his dignified gaze. He sighed inside and thought, my ninth son really has gone too far this time. Of all the people he could offend, he just had to choose the She Emperor of the She Empire. Shi Yu hesitated slightly before striking out with confidence. She killed the God Kings without showing any mercy. Faced with Shi Yu's attacks, the God Kings who had their cultivation sealed were unable to dodge at all. They could only watch death approach them. The two ancestral emperors from the Blood Sun Empire watched on and did not choose to interfere. They had some understanding of the She Emperor's temperament. He was a vicious person who could commit madness for his daughter without looking at the bigger picture at all. His massacre of the many primordial realm experts in the She Empire and personal slaughtering of his brothers was the best evidence. Even the authoritative Grand Imperial Protector of the She Empire had not been spared. Against someone so vicious, there would definitely be a battle between chaotic primes if they interfered to save these God Kings. Very soon, Shi Yu had dealt with all the God Kings who had come with the ninth prince. Sword Qi pierced their foreheads, dispersing their souls and killing them completely. They did not possess a tough body like Jian Chen's chaotic body. They could emerge unscathed from attacks of overgods, but once their cultivation was sealed up, even deities and origin realm experts could hurt them, let alone overgods. She Emperor, are you satisfied now? Once all the God Kings died, an ancestral emperor asked. Hand over the ninth prince, the She Emperor said emotionlessly. He spoke firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. This time, the two ancestral emperors struggled to remain composed. Their faces changed slightly. Even the Blood Emperor standing behind them revealed an ugly expression. Ignoring the heinous deeds the ninth prince had committed, he was still a member of the imperial family, a direct son of the Blood Sun Empire. His life did not matter, but he did represent the Blood Sun Empire. The hearts of the two ancestral emperors sank. They did not care about the life of the ninth prince. What they truly cared about was the dignity of the Blood Sun Empire. If they really handed over the ninth prince, and the She Emperor killed him right in front of them, would their Blood Sun Empire still have any dignity? She Emperor, we cannot hand you the prince. You've killed the God Kings and gotten your revenge. Will compensate everything your beloved daughter has suffered from with this droplet of spiritual essence of starry skies. Let's just leave the matter at this. What do you think, Shi Emperor, said an ancestral emperor of the Blood Sun Empire. He had also spoken firmly, unwilling to hand over the 9th prince. Shi Emperor, we cannot hand you the prince. You've killed the God Kings and gotten your revenge. Will compensate everything your beloved daughter has suffered from with this droplet of spiritual essence of starry skies. Let's just leave the matter at this. What do you think, Shi Emperor, said an ancestral emperor of the Blood Sun Empire. He had also spoken firmly, unwilling to hand over the 9th prince. If their Blood Sun Empire really allowed the 9th prince to be executed over some injuries to the Shi Emperor's beloved daughter, their status in the southern region would plummet. The Shi Emperor did not accept it at all. He snorted coldly, the true person behind yours injuries is still alive, so how have we gotten our revenge? Blood Sun Empire, let me just ask you one question. Are you going to hand him over or not? Shi Emperor, your daughter is completely fine now, so why must you demand so much for this matter? Do you really have to make a huge scene out of a petty matter? Why must you go so far? An ancestral emperor asked. The Blood Emperor did not even possess the right to speak before the 2 ancestral emperors. My daughter almost died here. That is no petty matter. The Shi Emperor's face was sunken. Killing intent filled his eyes. Afterwards, a ruler's presence began to radiate from him. At that moment, he seemed like the ruler of the world. He stared at the people from the Blood Sun Empire coldly and said with an extremely dignified voice, if you don't hand him over, our Shi Emperor will declare war on your Blood Sun Empire. The Shi Emperor's words were shocking. That short sentence boomed like thunder, deeply stunning everyone present. At that moment, whether it was the people of the Tian Yuan clan, the Divine King, or the Primordial Realm experts from the Heavenly Moon Empire, they were all shocked. They stared at the Shi Emperor in disbelief. The Shi Empire and the Blood Sun Empire represented the northern and southern regions respectively. They were empires who reigned across an entire region. Once a battle between the 2 eternal empires erupted, it would directly develop into a battle between 2 regions. The Shi Emperor would actually go as far as to declare war on the Blood Sun Empire for his daughter, regardless of the consequences. It made the expressions of all the people from the Blood Sun Empire change drastically. A madman. The Shi Emperor is a madman beyond control. Although his daughter was injured, isn't she standing beside him right now in perfect condition? Yet he still wants to declare war against our Blood Sun Empire. Doesn't he know how severe the consequences would be once 2 eternal empires go to war against each other? The Blood Emperor looked at the Shi Emperor as he cursed inside. Only the current Emperor of the Shi Empire could do something as absurd as this. The 2 ancestral emperors became stern at that moment. The emperors of eternal empires did not joke around. Since the Shi Emperor had said he would declare war, he definitely was not lying. He was ready to follow through on his words. No matter how mentally sturdy the 9th prince was, he still paled at this moment. He had never thought that injuring an over-god in a tiny clan would develop into a war between 2 eternal empires. This had frightened him. As the cause of all this, Xiu looked at the Shi Emperor with extremely mixed feelings. She experienced a multitude of emotions. Even she could not properly describe what she was feeling right now. It was even more evident for the important members of the Tian Yuan clan. They were completely dumbfounded. The 2 ancestral emperors looked at each other as their eyebrows were locked together tightly. They felt quite the headache when they faced the Shi Emperor, who completely ignored the bigger picture and would do anything for his daughter, even if it meant involving the entire Eternal Empire. Ziyun, calm down. At this moment, an ancient voice rang out. With it, the space beside the Shi Emperor rippled, and 2 ruddy old men emerged silently. They were Shi Haoxuan and Shi Haoming, who had hurried over from the Shi Empire. They were the ancestral emperors of the Shi Empire. As for Xiaofan, he was the father of the current emperor, Shi Ziyun. The appearance of Xiaofan and Shi Haoming did not make the Shi emperor's expression change at all. On the other hand, the empress immediately showed respect. She pulled Shi Yu over and bowed at Xiaofan and Shi Haoming first before looking at Shi Yu. She said gently, "They're your grandfather and great-grandfather. Why don't you greet them?" "Don't. He's not worthy of being your grandfather." However, the Shi emperor appeared before Shi Yu and said emotionlessly right after the empress spoke. Bitterness immediately filled Xiaofan's face. He sighed gently as he studied Shi Yu with his eyes. There was some benevolence in his gaze as well. "Ziyun, there's too much involved in declaring war. You can't say that so easily," Shi Haoming said to the Shi emperor sternly. "I'm the current emperor and one of the ancestral emperors of the Shi Empire. I have the authority. If the Blood Sun Empire doesn't hand him over, then I can only declare war," the Shi emperor said coldly. He showed no respect. Shi Haoming also sighed when he saw how stubborn the Shi emperor was. He felt rather helpless about the Shi emperor. As an ancestral emperor of the Shi Empire, he was a paramount existence. He represented the supreme authority of the eternal empire. If the current emperor dared to turn against him, he could even lay him off with a single word. However, Shi Ziyun was rather special to the point where even Shi Haoming and Xiaofan, his two seniors, had to let him have his way most of the time. "Ziyun, let me talk with the Blood Sun Empire instead. I'll try to reach a solution where we're both happy," Shi Haoming said to the Shi emperor. In the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire in the southern region, Jianchen and Kaya quickly made their way through the bustling streets. They hurried towards the center of the city. It was closest to the imperial palace there, so it was the safest place in the southern region. The Blood Sun Empire is the ruler of the southern region as the only eternal empire. The imperial palace is important in the Blood Sun Empire as well, so fighting is naturally prohibited. "I hope this place can keep Huaiyan at bay," Jianchen thought. Now that he had raised the attention of a vice-leader of the Empyrean demon cult, he felt like he was in great danger at all times. After all, a primordial realm expert was hunting him down. Although the Divine King had kept Huaiyan busy, he understood that this was only temporary. The Divine King could not buy a lot of time for him. After they arrived in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, Jianchen contemplated what he should do next. Although the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire was the safest place in the southern region, he could not remain here forever. After they arrived in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, Jianchen contemplated what he should do next. Although the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire was the safest place in the southern region, he could not remain here forever. After all, he could say that he had already fallen out with the 9th Prince of the Blood Sun Empire with what had happened in the Een Mountains of Seven's despair. He was closer than ever to the 9th Prince here. Aside from that, although the imperial capital could keep Huaiyan at bay, it was keeping him at bay at most. If Huaiyan truly wanted to act recklessly, the Blood Sun Empire would not be able to do anything to him. After all, an extremely terrifying Great Elder supported the Empyrean demon cult behind Huaiyan. Let alone the eternal Blood Sun Empire, but even those peak clans of the Cloud Plain did not dare to provoke the Great Elder so easily. In the current Cloud Plain, probably nowhere is completely safe apart from the central region. Do I really have to go to the central region? Jianchen thought. He could not help but think of Tong Tian now that the central region had been brought up. The Tong family that Tong Tian came from was located in the central region. He still possessed the jade pendant Tong Tian had given him. No, I definitely can't go to the central region. Huaiyan has already come personally to kill me. It means that he already views me as a thorn in his side. If I go to the central region, he'll definitely come pursuing. Once I draw him to the central region, it'll increase the danger to Uncle Xiao as well. Uncle Xiao holds the 9 blood beads and soul beads that the Empyrean demon cult has spent countless years refining. This matter ties into far too many things, so if the people from the Empyrean demon cult learn about this, the consequences will be unimaginable. As a result, I can't go. I can't make it more dangerous for Uncle Xiao. Jian Chen frowned. He discovered that although the cloud plain was vast, there was actually nowhere where he could go. This was all because the organization behind Huayan was just too great. Otherwise, although Huayan would be able to move around freely the southern region with his strength as an infinite prime, there would be no need for eternal empires to treat him with caution. Jian Chen, I heard that the Saints' world has a total of 49 great plains and 81 great planets. Our cloud plane is only one of the 49 planes. Since we can't stay on the cloud plane anymore, why don't we leave temporarily and return once we're powerful enough? Kaya said. Although she had not spent a lot of time conscious in the Saints' world, she possessed some basic understanding. She had also learnt just how powerful the Empyrean demon cult was from what Jian Chen had told her. As a result, she understood just how troublesome of a matter it was now that they had caught the eye of an infinite prime of the Empyrean demon cult. Kaya paused. After some thought, she continued, moreover, with our cultivation speed, I believe we won't need to fear Huayan before long. Leave the cloud plane? A sliver of bitterness appeared on Jian Chen's face. It was easy to say that, but it was nowhere close to easy when it came to practice. He did not have 5-colored divine crystals to pay to use the teleportation formations. The teleportation formations between planes were extremely expensive to use. In the past, Fairy Hao Yu even had to kill an extremely powerful primordial realm expert for the Xiandao Empire to obtain enough 5-colored divine crystals to go home. Right now, although Jian Chen possessed supreme quality divine crystals from Yashi Lian, it was still not enough once they had been converted to 5-colored divine crystals. At this moment, the faces of Jian Chen and Kaya changed. They suddenly looked behind them and found that 3 demonic auras radiated from the end of the bustling street. They approached Jian Chen and Kaya extremely quickly. What powerful demonic auras! They're from the Empyrean demon cult. They're god kings from the Empyrean demon cult. They've actually come to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. The Empyrean demon cult really is too arrogant. They don't even know how to keep a low profile in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. They're completely looking down on the Blood Sun Empire. The arrival of the 3 late god kings from the Empyrean demon cult immediately attracted the attention of many people in the imperial capital. However, even though they looked at the 3 god kings in displeasure, no one dared to stand forward. As if the 3 god kings wanted the people there to know they were from the Empyrean demon cult, they did not conceal their presences at all even though they were in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Their late god king presences surged out as demonic aura emanated into their surroundings, shrouding them as a thick, black mist. At the same time, at the other end of the bustling street several kilometers away, there was a white-robed young man who seemed to be in his 20s with a fan. He strolled around idly with 2 female attendants. When the 3 god kings of the Empyrean demon cult entered the imperial city, the young man stopped. He frowned and said, "The Empyrean demon cult is just too arrogant. What do they think the imperial capital of our Blood Sun Empire is? It's not a place where they can behave as they wish. Your Highness, looking at how they're behaving, they're probably hunting down people that have offended them. Let's just endure a small matter like this." "We can't make a ruckus," a female attendant said from behind the young man. The young man's face sank. Suddenly, he opened his fan and said, "If I just let this pass, will our imperial family still have any pride left?" Jian Chen and Kaya became grim when they sensed the 3 god kings in pursuit. Jian Chen called out, "They've arrived here faster than I imagined. It looks like they don't plan on treating the Blood Sun Empire cautiously at all and plan to eliminate us in the imperial capital. Let's go." Jian Chen grabbed Kaya and immediately took off, approaching the imperial palace of the Blood Sun Empire. However, the two of them were unable to take to the skies in the imperial capital. They could only hover along the ground, so their speed was naturally drastically affected as a result. Did you think you'd be safe once you made it to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire? You are far too naive. At this moment, a deep voice rang out from behind. The three God Kings had already locked onto Jian Chen's presence. They were completely fearless in the imperial capital, where their speed suddenly exploded, and they directly took to the skies. They made it past Jian Chen and Kaya in the blink of an eye, landing before them to block their path. The vice leader had personally ordered your capture, so even if you escape to the ends of the world, you won't be able to run away from our Empyrean demon cult. Just give up, sneered a God King. He directly attacked the two of them after that. Clearly, he was unwilling to waste too much time. After all, this was the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Although their statuses could act as a form of deterrence, it would not benefit them at all if they wasted too much time. Jian Chen and Kaya became extremely stern. Jian Chen equipped his god artifact as soon as possible and circulated the chaotic force within him, pushing the defenses of the chaotic body to the limit. He even drew the cracked startling rainbow sword. The Empyrean demon cult really is getting bolder and bolder. At this moment, a cold snort rang out from behind. With a flash, a person appeared before Jian Chen and Kaya. He was a young man who wore white robes and held a fan. The young man's face did not change when he was faced with the attacks of the three God Kings. He directly swung his fan. Immediately, the air around them moved. The world seemed to be flipped from the young man's action. The power of laws in the young man's fan seemed to affect the space there, making it become slightly different. The attacks from the three God Kings rebounded without any prior signs when they came in contact with the space. The energy that they sent towards Jian Chen and Kaya had been reflected back towards them. The expressions of the three God Kings changed. However, they were experienced after all, so even though this had happened suddenly, they reacted as quickly as possible. God King level laws descended, and they sent out a second attack to nullify the first. Immediately, powerful energy splayed out. If they were in the wilderness, the energy would be powerful enough to crush mountains. However, an extremely powerful formation protected the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, so the energy naturally failed to cause any damage at all. The young man had nullified the attacks from the three late God Kings single-handedly. Moreover, he remained composed, without losing the upper hand at all. He was clearly extremely powerful. The young man had nullified the attacks from the three late God Kings single-handedly. Moreover, he remained composed, without losing the upper hand at all. He was clearly extremely powerful. As Jian Chen encountered more and more God Kings, even clashing with some several times, he started to possess some understanding towards them. When the young man moved, Jian Chen could clearly sense that he was also a late God King like the God Kings from the Empyrean demon cult. They were at the same level of cultivation, yet the young man managed to match them all by himself. He was definitely a great prodigy. The imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire really is a nest of monsters. Just a random person can be this powerful, Jian Chen was secretly surprised. Before him, the three God Kings from the Empyrean demon cult churned with demonic aura, which shrouded their figures in black mist. One of them said sternly, "Who are you, bold enough to get in the way of the Empyrean demon cult's matters? Leave immediately, and we can forget about what you just did. Otherwise, you will become an enemy of the Empyrean demon cult." The Empyrean demon cult had always acted as they wished on the cloud plane. Even after arriving in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, they did not tone it down in the slightest. They were completely fearless. The young man opened his fan and flapped it leisurely. He sneered, aren't the three of you looking down on the Blood Sun Empire too much? Why don't you look at where you are with what you said before? You dare to threaten me in my own territory? Let alone you three unimpressive protectors, even if your vice leader comes here personally, he'll have to consider something like that properly before doing anything. At this moment, a large number of guards that belonged to the imperial capital hurried over from the surroundings. Several god kings had already flown out from the imperial palace as well, approaching them with lightning speed. In just a few seconds, the three god kings from the Empyrean demon cult were surrounded. The god kings from the imperial palace looked at them coldly as they surrounded them. They had already emitted their tremendous presences slowly. Even though they were surrounded, the three god kings remained composed. They did not become flustered at all. One of them said, "The vice leader has personally ordered the capture of these two people. Does your Blood Sun Empire plan on protecting them? I have no interests in who the vice leader wants to capture. This is the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, not a place where you can act as you wish. Your Empyrean demon cult still hasn't achieved absolute supremacy in the southern region. Please return. Otherwise, I can only send you out of the city," the white-robed young man said coldly. The three protectors of the Empyrean demon cult contemplated it shortly. After judging the situation they were in, they could only leave powerlessly in the end. With the departure of the three protectors, Jian Chen clasped his fist at the young man and said, "I'm Jian Chen. Thank you for your help today. I will remember the kindness you have shown." Jian Chen. The young man's eyes immediately narrowed when he heard Jian Chen's name. He stared at Jian Chen with some surprise. "You're that Jian Chen who defeated a god king in the northern region?" "That's me," said Jian Chen. The young man smiled slightly and studied Jian Chen. He said, "No wonder the three protectors of the Empyrean demon cult are hunting you down while you're still an over-god. You captured Yashi Lian in the past and got the Divine King to use her as a hostage, forcing Huaiyan to agree to his terms. With Huaiyan's temperament, he'll definitely nurse a grievance because of that. Moreover, you're a supreme over-god who can make it onto the over-god's plaque with your impressive talent. You'll pose quite the threat to the Empyrean demon cult in the future, so Huaiyan will definitely move against you. Of the three vice leaders, Huaiyan is the most intolerant and vengeful. You need to be more careful now that you've caught Huaiyan's eyes." As soon as he reached there, the young man paused. He gazed off into the distance and became stern. He said, "It looks like Huaiyan treats you with far more importance than I had imagined. He has actually come personally. Jian Chen. You better leave here fast." As a vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, Huaiyan possesses various secret technique. Coupled with his cultivation as an infinite prime, he will be able to deal with you easily without violating any rules of our Blood Sun Empire. Huaiyan had arrived extremely quickly. Before the young man had even finished speaking, Huaiyan had appeared on the street silently. He stared at Jian Chen coldly. On the other hand, Jian Chen did not hesitate at all. He left as quickly as he could with Kaya, disappearing from the street in an instant. The white-clothed young man only stood before Huaiyan. He said steadily, "I never thought that the famed vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, Huaiyan, would personally visit our Blood Sun Empire. I wonder whether our Blood Sun Empire should receive you as an esteemed guest, or maintain the status quo and directly ask you to leave. Vice Leader Huaiyan, you're making it very difficult for me." Huaiyan was just about to pursue Jian Chen. He looked at the young man before him, and he immediately frowned. He did not recognize this young man, but seeing how he did not fear him as a mere god king and the fact that he had used "our" when referring to the empire, Huaiyan instantly determined that this young man was a part of the imperial family. Moreover, he possessed quite some status in the family. However, it did not matter even if he had some status. As a vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, even the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire would fear him slightly. He immediately snorted coldly, "I've come to capture wanted people. I have no time to tangle with you. Leave immediately, or don't blame me for being rude. As he said that, the pressure of the primordial realm radiated from Huayan, directly forcing the young man away. Huayan, this is the Blood Sun Empire, not your Empyrean demon cult. If you want to act so recklessly, I can only make you leave the imperial capital. Just when Huayan released his pressure, a heavy and clear voice directly rang out in his head from the imperial palace. Humph, I naturally know the rules of your Blood Sun Empire. My visit today has nothing to do with you. As long as you don't get in my way, I won't violate any of your rules, Huayan replied coldly. He no longer bothered to deal with the young man, disappearing with a flash in pursuit of Jian Chen. The young man with a fan looked in the direction where Huayan had vanished off to. There was a sliver of reluctance in his eyes, and he said to the imperial palace, Imperial Protector, Jian Chen is a talent of our southern region after all. He'll definitely become an expert who can dominate the region in the future. Are we just supposed to watch the Empyrean demon cult do harm to him from the sidelines? There are countless talents in the saints' world, and even many unprecedented prodigies. However, just how many of them are able to make it to the apex in the end? Even if they're first on the Overgod's plaque or first on the God King's throne, aren't there many examples where they die before they can rise to the peak of their power? There's no need to offend the Empyrean demon cult over such matters. The heavy and clear voice rang out again from the imperial palace, but only the young man could hear it. Currently, Jian Chen and Kaya moved through the streets of the imperial capital rapidly, trying to pull as far away from Huayan as possible. He thought of any plans he could use. However, at this moment, Jian Chen and Kaya both stopped as they hovered above the ground. They gazed ahead. Before them stood a white-robed, ruddy old man. He stared at Jian Chen and Kaya with a strange light in his eyes. Chanlong, how are you here? Kaya asked. She was surprised. The old man was Master Chanlong, the person that Jian Chen had some conflict with in the past. However, Jian Chen's grievances with Master Chanlong had gradually been resolved through the gratitude Jian Chen felt towards him for saving Kaya when the 7 protectors of the Earth Spirit sect killed their way into the provincial city of the Dong'an province. Jian Chen also felt extremely surprised about meeting Chanlong here. Master Chanlong became extremely stern. He said with a deep voice, I know you're in extremely deep trouble. Don't say anything, just follow me quickly. Before he had even finished speaking, Master Chanlong turned around and left. Jian Chen and Kaya looked at each other. Although they had no idea what Master Chanlong had in mind, they clearly had no other choices at a time like this. They could only follow Master Chanlong closely. Under Master Chanlong's lead, the 3 of them arrived at an extremely large square in the imperial capital very soon. Just the width of the square was several dozen kilometers, and it was completely packed. The most eye-catching part of it was an extremely large flying vehicle parked at the very center of the square. It was several dozen kilometers long and several dozen kilometers high. It hovered in the sky like an imposing mountain, basically taking up the entire square. Just a single glance at it would make people feel overwhelmed. Take this and board the ship with me quickly. Once we're on the spatial battleship, we'll be temporarily safe. Master Chanlong gave a jade talisman to Kaya and Jian Chen before taking them towards the spatial battleship quickly. Spatial battleship? A sliver of doubt appeared in Jian Chen's eyes. He looked at the humongous flying vehicle before him in confusion as he followed Chanlong towards it. At this moment, he no longer cared about the purposes the spatial battleship served. Even if he had to wade through a world of danger to evade the pursuit of an infinite prime, he would do it. Jian Chen, stop. Just when Jian Chen was about to board the spatial battleship, a thunderous voice boomed in his head. The terrifying sound waves rebounded in Jian Chen's head, causing his soul to rock violently, almost collapsing. His consciousness became blurred while the chaotic force within him paused at that moment. He had almost fallen out of the sky. Behind them, Huaiyan hurried over as he stared at Jian Chen with a sunken face. Beside Jian Chen, Kaya sensed what was happening and immediately grabbed Jian Chen's shoulder. Her speed suddenly exploded as she flew towards the cabin door. "Don't you even think about leaving the cloud plane." Huaiyan was pale. At that moment, he could no longer care about breaking the rules of the Blood Sun Empire. He raised his hand and reached towards Jian Chen from afar. As he extended his hand, his entire arm elongated. His hand had turned into a black cloud that obscured the sky and trapped space, lunging towards Jian Chen and Kaya. Kaya and Jian Chen immediately sank. The tremendous pressure had immobilized the two of them. They could only watch on as Huaiyan's hand fell towards them. Chapter 1987, The Red-Robed Old Man. This was the second time Huaiyan had attacked Jian Chen and Kaya. The first time, he had just casually struck out. He did not aim to injure Jian Chen and Kaya. Rather, he wanted to draw out the Divine King who was hiding in the shadows. As a result, Jian Chen and Kaya were still able to fight back at that time. Even though they were as insignificant as ants to primordial realm experts, they could still bite back during the prior encounter. However, now that Jian Chen and Kaya were about to enter the spatial battleship, Huaiyan, who understood the vehicle's power very well, directly struck out furiously in a panic. The might of this strike was far greater than the one when he first attacked them. Just the tremendous pressure had frozen Kaya and Jian Chen. Master Chanlong's face changed all of a sudden. He wanted to hurry back to save Kaya, but there was nothing he could do against a strike from a primordial realm expert. "Huaiyan, aren't you looking down on the Blood Sun Empire too much? It looks like it's time to show that your Empyrean demon cult has become swollen with arrogance." At this moment, an elderly voice rang out. A red-robed old man had silently appeared above the spatial battleship. The old man kept his presence concealed, making it impossible to tell his cultivation level or detect his existence. He seemed to have fused with the entire sky when he appeared. The old man looked at Huaiyan coldly and raised his right hand calmly. He gently extended a finger towards the hand that reached towards Jian Chen and Kaya. The movement seemed simple. It did not give off any pulses of energy, nor did any particular pressure accompany it. However, the space before the old man suddenly contracted and produced a ripple in space, spreading out at an unbelievable speed. When Huaiyan's huge hand was only 10 meters away from Jian Chen and Kaya, it suddenly came to a halt. The space around it seemed to have been frozen at that moment. However, the effects of the gesture clearly did not just end there. In the next moment, the space in the area shattered loudly from the pulse, forming a huge crack. Countless spatial shards and spatial wind surged out, surrounding Huaiyan's hand. The spatial shards and wind were extremely terrifying. Huaiyan's hand was reduced to a bloody mess in a single instance from the ravaging of the shards and wind. Huaiyan's gaze was cold. He looked at the old man emotionlessly. The old man had trapped his right hand there, so he had to endure the ravaging of the spatial shards and wind. No matter how hard he tried, his hand remained trapped there. However, he completely ignored his right hand. He looked at Jian Chen, and his killing intent immediately erupted. With a thought, a sword appeared over his head. It was red as if it had been doused with blood. The moment it appeared, it gave off an extremely heavy smell of blood. The wails of countless ghosts seemed to emerge as countless souls struggled in there. Clearly, the sword had been covered in blood for who knows how long. It had completely turned into a demonic artifact. Swish! As soon as the sword had appeared, it shot off as a red streak of light, directly slashing through space towards Jian Chen. Huaiyan's desire to kill Jian Chen had already reached the point of no return. Now that Jian Chen was about to board the spatial battleship and leave the cloud plane, he could not allow it. As a result, he basically wanted to kill Jian Chen regardless of the consequences right now. even if he had to offend the Blood Sun Empire, even if he had to lose an arm. The red sword moved extremely quickly, so fast that distance seemed insignificant before it. With a flash, it arrived before Jian Chen, stabbing towards his head with a bloody presence. However, it was also at this moment that the space around Jian Chen and Kaya pulsed gently. In this moment of life and death, Jian Chen and Kaya vanished. The sword hit nothing. Huaiyan's gaze shifted upward slightly. He looked at the huge cabin door of the spatial battleship and saw that Jian Chen and Kaya had already appeared outside the cabin silently. They were just about to enter. This person is wanted by our Empyrean demon cult. He is related to a major matter that has happened to our cult recently. If you stop me, you are opposing the Empyrean demon cult. I will definitely report this matter to the higher-ups. Once the Great Elder is alarmed, you won't be able to endure the consequences, Huaiyan roared out. With a thought, the sword flashed and continued towards Jian Chen. He was not afraid of failing to kill Jian Chen. His demonic artifact had the ability to devour souls. Those who were slain by the sword could have their souls directly wiped out if he chose to. As long as he injured Jian Chen with the sword, even if it just scratched him, his demonic artifact could suck away Jian Chen's soul instantly. The red-robed old man did not waver at all from Huaiyan's threats. Do you think that you'll be able to scare me once you mention the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult? I tell you what's even more funny. A mere over-god being able to alarm the Great Elder that rarely ever appears. Huaiyan, don't you think what you're saying is rather hilarious? With that, the old man grabbed at space. With his gesture, the world seemed to enter his palm, and the sword that shot towards Jian Chen appeared in his hand silently. The old man gripped the blade with 2 fingers. No matter how the sword struggled, it was unable to break free from the old man's grasp. At this moment, Kaya had already grabbed Jian Chen's shoulder, entering the spatial battleship with Chanlong. They had vanished from Huaiyan's view. Huaiyan's face became terrifyingly sunken. He understood the power of the spatial battleship. Once Jian Chen had entered the cabin, it would mean he had lost his opportunity to eliminate Jian Chen unless this overgod decided to come out again. Naturally, the spatial battleship would come across various dangers as it moved through outer space. It would even encounter the attacks of extremely powerful space beasts. As a result, various formations covered the spatial battleship, making it extremely powerful in terms of both offense and defense. With his cultivation as a first heavenly layer infinite prime, there was nothing he could do to it. Chapter 1988, Houston's disaster. As for tailing the spatial battleship along the way and killing Jian Chen after he disembarked, that was even more impossible. This was because once the spatial battleship reached outer space and set off, even 9th heavenly layer infinite primes would not be able to follow it. Probably only chaotic primes could match its speed. After all, it was a form of transportation between the 49 Great Planes and the 81 Great Planets of the Saints' world. Naturally, it would have to move extremely quickly. Outside the spatial battleship, Huaiyan stared at Jian Chen, who had disappeared into the cabin door, with a sunken face. He greatly resented the red-robed old man who had stopped him. If it were not for this old man who had interfered time and time again, Jian Chen would already be in his hands. Unfortunately, despite also being an infinite prime, he was not as powerful as the red-robed old man, so he could only bury the hatred in his heart. Huaiyan, leave the imperial capital, said the red-robed old man. His indifferent voice possessed a certain coldness. The Empyrean demon cult was in existence many organizations on the cloud plane found repulsive. If it were not for the mysterious and terrifying Great Elder, the Empyrean demon cult definitely would not still exist after what it had done throughout the years. Only now did Huaiyan draw his right hand back. His entire hand had vanished already. However, he paid no attention to the injuries of his arm. He stared at the red-robed old man emotionlessly and snorted coldly before directly leaving. He had already lost his chance to kill Jian Chen. Now, in the cabin, Jian Chen gradually recovered from the bellow that had stunned his soul. Afterwards, under Master Chanlong's lead, they made their way through the spatial battleship before stopping in an extremely large cabin. The cabin was clearly at the bottom of the spatial battleship. Several hundred cushion-sized pedestals were set up neatly there, and quite a few people were scattered across them. Under Master Chanlong's lead, Jian Chen and Kaya sat down on the pedestals as well. What is this place? Jian Chen looked around. He was in doubt. Master Chanlong sat on a pedestal beside Jian Chen. He said to Jian Chen and Kaya secretly, "Spatial battleships are extremely well-known vehicles for transportation in the Saints' world. They are for journeys between planes. Although there are teleportation formations across planes in the Saints' world, they're extremely expensive to use. Even some primordial realm experts can't afford to use them. As for spatial battleships, they are much cheaper than the teleportation formations such that even a few deities can afford to use them. The only downside is that they are much slower compared to teleportation formations. Teleportation formations can traverse the distance between planes in an extremely short amount of time, no matter how far apart they are. However, spatial battleships need years, decades, or even centuries to reach their destination. Clearly, Master Chanlong understood spatial battleships extremely well. He explained them to Jian Chen and Kaya. Jian Chen knew that he was about to leave the cloud plane on the spatial battleship. He completely fell silent as the matter weighed on his heart. His face was filled with worry. Everything had happened just too suddenly. He was not prepared. In particular, he was worried about the Tian Yuan clan. This was because Rui Jin, Hong Lian, Heiyu, Nubis, Sacred Feather, and so on, the people who had come up from the Tian Yuan continent with him, all remained in the Tian Yuan clan. Now, I can only hope that the Divine King can protect the Tian Yuan clan, Jian Chen thought. He was filled with bitterness. He had never thought that as a mighty vice-leader of the Empyrean demon cult and a powerful primordial realm expert, Huayan would actually come personally to kill a mere overgod like him. He was indeed helpless against the pursuit of a primordial realm expert with his current strength. Even fleeing was wishful thinking. If experts from the Blood Sun Empire had not stopped Huayan, he would fail to even board this spatial battleship. I really had no choice with leaving this time. Huayan, I will return. Jian Chen clasped his hands as his eyes shone with determination. Back on the cloud plane, not only was the central region the center of the vast place, but it was also the most prosperous region of the cloud plane. Most of the organizations who stood at the peak of the cloud plane were located here. Moreover, the only everlasting empire of the entire cloud plane was located here as well. Right now, in the remote wilderness of the central region, Houston currently fled in a disheveled shape in his blood-red robes. He was covered in wounds right now, and every single one of them was vicious, where blood constantly poured out. He faced the merciless pursuit of over a dozen god kings. Behind him, the god kings looked at Houston with burning desire. They pursued him as they fought against the god kings around them. All of them wanted to approach Houston first, but none of them wanted someone else to be faster than them. Once they made it to the front, they would be faced with the merciless attacks of people beside or behind them. As a result, even though more than a dozen god kings were chasing an overgod, they were unable to catch up to him due to the interference from the people around them. The god artifact is mine. All of you piss off. Whoever gets in this king's way, this king will pay you a visit once this matter has concluded. The god kings all bellowed out furiously. Many of their eyes were bloodshot. Houston's god artifact made their hearts beat heavily as blood surged through their bodies. God artifacts were items that even many primordial realm experts did not possess. It tempted them greatly. Ahead, Houston constantly coughed up blood. After arriving in the central region, he originally wanted to find a remote location for cultivation. However, he had never thought he would come across a powerful beast in the wilderness, forcing him to use the Empyrean demon orb against it. It was also at this time that a passing god king discovered the Empyrean demon orb and became interested in it, forcing Houston to reveal the secret that he possessed a god artifact on him. Houston was not the opponent of a god king at all. If it were not for the Empyrean demon orb, he probably would not even have been able to escape. As a result, he used the Empyrean demon orb to flee. He was forced to use the Empyrean demon orb against the pursuit of a god king, or he would have ended up in his hands much earlier on. As a result, he was unable to store the Empyrean demon cult away and keep it hidden. This also resulted in the special presence of a god artifact that the Empyrean demon cult possessed to draw over even more god kings, which increased from the initial one to over a dozen now. Chapter 1989, Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. There's actually a god artifact here? At this moment, a deep voice boomed through the surroundings, echoing through the area, making it impossible to find its origins. A tremendous pressure that filled up the entire space there accompanied it. Just the pressure alone made Houston suddenly sink. He felt like he was suffocating. He struggled to breathe before the pressure. The pressure was just too terrifying to him. It was like a primordial beast, something that the god kings behind him could not compare to. The expressions of the god kings who fought against each other also changed drastically the moment the pressure appeared. They all could not help but stop. A middle-aged man had appeared silently close to Houston. The tremendous presence he gave off made it seem like he could destroy the surroundings just by raising his hand. At this moment, the middle-aged man was somewhat overjoyed. At the same time, he looked at the god artifact in Houston's hands with burning desire. He murmured, although it's a demonic god artifact, it's still a god artifact, and it seems to be of good quality. With that, the middle-aged man suddenly laughed aloud. Excitement filled his face evidently as he said, "Heaven really is smiling at me. I reached the primordial realm so many years ago, but I've never come into the possession of a god artifact. I never thought I'd come across one in such a remote place today. It looks like the heavens have blessed me. It looks like I'll have to disappoint you. The god artifact won't end up with you." At this moment, another voice rang out. A black-robed young man appeared near the middle-aged man. His face was cold, and his eyes were filled with an intense sense of viciousness, where people dared not to make eye contact with him. God artifacts are items that even many infinite primes don't possess. Since I've come across one, how can I miss it? Especially when it's a god artifact of quite a good quality. After the black-robed young man, an old man appeared. His face was covered with wrinkles, and he was hunchbacked, making him seem frail. The three people hovered in a triangular formation around Houston. The three of them did not even glance at the god kings who were pursuing Houston before. Even Houston did not seem to exist in their eyes. All they could see was the Empyrean demon orb. There's only a single god artifact, but there are three of us. How will we split it? In the end, the old man chuckled. When he glanced past the Empyrean demon orb, he clearly desired it dearly from the gaze he showed. This god artifact will naturally end up with the capable, the black-robed young man said coldly. With that, he immediately appeared before Houston. He reached out with a hand, trapping down the region before him. He moved directly towards the Empyrean demon orb. When the young man moved, Houston felt his body tighten. The tremendous presence had completely immobilized him. Even with the Empyrean demon orb, he was still helpless against the young man. The young man was simply too powerful. In Houston's eyes, he seemed like the ruler of the world, so powerful that he was undefeatable. At the same time, the old man and the middle-aged man moved as well. They appeared beside Houston at basically the same time as the young man. They all reached towards the Empyrean demon orb. Terrifying pressure surged out, pressing down on Houston to the point where he even felt like his heart had stopped beating. Blood oozed out of all his pores. Before the three people, let alone escape, he was as insignificant as an ant even when he could use the Empyrean demon orb. Even though the Empyrean demon orb was an impressive god artifact, Houston was unable to unleash the might of a god artifact with his strength. In reality, even god kings would struggle to use a god artifact. Even if they received the recognition of the artifact spirit, they would still be unable to unleash the might of the god artifact. Only primordial realm experts could use the destructive power of a god artifact as they wished. In this moment of life and death, a golden, three-legged cauldron suddenly appeared. It fell on Houston with lightning speed. Seeing this, the expressions of three people who had originally extended their hands toward the Empyrean demon orb changed slightly. They snorted coldly, and they sent a palm strike at the cauldron with devastating power. Boom! With a deafening sound, terrifying energy ripped through space such that the space around the cauldron cracked. The pitch-black fissures intersected with one another, expanding like a huge web. Terrifying pulses of energy ravaged the surroundings as a devastating storm, making the ground below shake. Mountains 100 kilometers away collapsed. Even the god kings nearby were forced into a constant retreat from the pulse of energy. Laws interwove in their surroundings as they resisted with their full strength. The golden cauldron shone brightly, giving off shocking energy pulses. It made the world pale in comparison. Moreover, the unique presence of a god artifact radiated from it. A god artifact. The eyes of the black-robed young man narrowed. He stared at the cauldron that had endured the strikes from the three of them and became stern. "Sir, you already have a god artifact. Are you unsatisfied with it, and you want to compete with us for this one?" The old man growled. A white-robed young man hovered above the golden cauldron. He said emotionlessly, "I am taking away this person." With that, the young man waved his hand, and the cauldron over Houston immediately shrank to the size of a fist, flying into the young man's hand. The young man directly left with it. "Don't you go." The three infinite primes pursued him. However, they lost track of the young man very soon. Houston had been completely cut off from the outside world the moment the cauldron had surrounded him. At the same time, he lost all concept of time. He had been plunged into complete darkness. After some time, Houston felt his surroundings suddenly brighten. He discovered that he had arrived on a mountain. The origin energy in the surroundings was extremely abundant. It was to the point where it formed a mist. "The Lord of the Peak wishes to see you. Come with me." At this moment, a voice rang out from behind Houston. The white-robed young man who had saved Houston studied him curiously as he spoke indifferently. Then he directly made his way to the mountain peak. "Senior, where is this?" Houston asked. He knew the young man was powerful. If the young man wanted to deal with him, he would not be able to escape no matter what, so he just followed the young man up the mountain. At the same time, he took out some healing pills and consumed them. "Heaven's Link Peak." The young man spoke sparingly. After stating the location, he said nothing else. Houston directly ascended to the peak of the mountain behind the young man. At the moment, Houston was covered in blood. He arrived in a stone pavilion that stood near a cliff. A ruddy, sagely old man sat on a stone seat with his eyes closed. He did not move at all and was just like a statue. The young man stopped outside the pavilion and clasped his hands at the old man politely. He said, "Lord, the person has been brought here." The old man slowly opened his eyes and glanced at Houston casually. However, at this moment, his simple gaze seemed to change as well. The shards of time seemed to drift, the world seemed puny, and the universe seemed to evolve in his eyes. With that glance alone, he seemed to see Houston's past and future. Afterwards, he looked at the Empyrean demon orb and finally became stern. Houston, you do not need to worry. On the Heaven's Link Peak, you are very safe. No one can threaten you. For the next period of time, you should cultivate here in peace, the sagely old man said to Houston. He spoke gently. Houston clasped his hands at the old man and said, "Thank you for saving me, Senior. May I know who you are and why you have saved me?" Houston was very confused about this. The white-robed young man was already terrifyingly powerful, yet he had to bow to this old man. He just could not imagine how respected the ordinary-looking old man was. On the cloud plain, others call me the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. There is no need for you to thank me for saving you. I am not saving you but all the lives in the world, said the Lord of the Peak. Saving all the lives in the world? Senior, may I ask you what you mean? Said Houston. His words had left Houston completely perplexed. The Lord of the Peak glanced at the Empyrean demon orb deeply and sighed gently. He said, "Don't probe into this too much. You will understand in the future." With that, the Lord of the Peak allowed a young boy to take Houston away. Lord of the Peak, this disciple is very confused. He's just an over-god, so pitifully weak, so how is he connected to all the lives in the world? After Houston's departure, the white-robed young man who had saved him asked politely. He was also doubtful. The Lord of the Peak sighed gently. He gazed at the boundless sky, and his gaze became profound. He said, "The demonic god artifact in his hands are related to great matters. Nothing can happen to it, or once that person comes, there will definitely be a storm of blood on the cloud plain." With that, the white-robed young man was startled. He asked, "Who is he? Is he really that powerful? Moreover, apart from the Lord of the Peak yourself, our cloud plain has the Tian Empire and the various major organization. Is there still a need to fear this person?" The Lord of the Peak nodded. Now that that person had been mentioned, he became very stern. He said, "That person really is very powerful. In the current cloud plain, there is no one who is his opponent. It's best if we don't provoke him." The young man was shocked. He knew exactly who the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak was, yet he still feared this person so much. Who was he? The white-robed young man could not help but think of Houston again. He had never thought that the puny over-god the Lord of the Peak had asked him to save would be related to such a great matter. Chapter 1990, An Agreement of 10,000 Years. The two ancestral emperors of the Xi Empire, who had come from the northern region, Xiaofan and Xiaoming, were currently having a discussion with the two ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire. They conversed secretly through communication techniques. As such, aside from the four of them, no one else knew the contents of their negotiation, including the Xi Emperor, Shi Ziyun. However, the Xi Emperor did not care about their negotiation at all. He did not care about the process. He only wanted to know the outcome. If the outcome dissatisfied him, no one could stop what he would do, even if two of the ancestral emperors of the Xi Empire were present, including his father. In the past, when he was still a prince, Shi Ziyun was refined and graceful. He was knowledgeable, skilled in both planning and scheming. He excelled in all aspects, earning his father's high regard. However, the Shi Ziyun of the past just happened to be a pacifist, showing no interest in the position of emperor at all. He had not even considered contending for the position. As a result, in the past, Shi Ziyun did not develop the power on his side like the other princes in the Xi Empire. He had always been alone as a prince, and he maintained an extremely low profile. However, the matters of the past had made him lose his daughter, and it was also from that moment onwards that he changed drastically. He stopped being a pacifist. For his daughter, he had almost become insane, wildly taking revenge on his enemies who had hunted him down and caused him to lose his daughter. This was more than enough to show just how important his daughter was to him. In the eyes of other emperors, the interests of the empire were supreme. They were willing to lose their children for the empire. However, Shi Ziyun was different. He was an emperor who could sacrifice the empire for his daughter. Now that he had finally found his long-lost daughter, he would certainly do everything for her. As the ancestral emperors of the two eternal empires negotiated with one another, the Shi Emperor and the Empress revolved around Shi Yu as they showed great concern for her. At that moment, they did not seem like an emperor and an empress at all. However, Shi Yu spoke sparingly when she was faced with the care and concern from the Shi Emperor and the Empress. She stared at them with extremely mixed feelings. Even she struggled to describe the emotions she was feeling. All of this had happened so suddenly. Just when the Tian Yuan clan faced a great disaster, the parents she had never seen before actually appeared and completely overwhelmed the ninth prince. At the same time, they stood up against the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire. All of this was like a dream to Shi Yu. It was as if she still had not completely accepted the dramatic developments from the bottom of her heart. It went without saying for the reactions of the people in the surroundings. They seemed to have turned into stone long ago. I never thought that Shi Yu of the Tian Yuan clan would actually be the daughter of the emperor of the Shi Empire. Sang Tu, you should be glad you did not become enemies with the Tian Yuan clan. Otherwise, the consequences would have been. The Divine King sighed as he communicated this to the ancestor of the Earth Spirit sect secretly. The ancestor of the Earth Spirit sect experienced angst. Only he understood the reason why he had let the Tian Yuan clan go, even giving them a god king from his sect to settle the grievances between them, and it was not because of Jian Chen's talent. Instead, the woman in white had threatened him. Sang Tu feared her deeply, or even dreaded her due to her might. As a result, he had stepped down and dared not to target the Tian Yuan clan anymore. If it had not been for the woman in white, Sang Tu would have never just let the matter be. After all, this affected the pride and prestige of his Earth Spirit sect. As a peak organization in the Heavenly Moon Empire, the Earth Spirit sect naturally needed to protect their pride. However, only after personally witnessing what had happened in the Tian Yuan clan did Sang Tu realize just how clever of a decision settling his differences with the Tian Yuan clan was. However, Sang Tu seemed to think of something very soon. His face immediately changed, and his forehead became covered with cold sweat. Great unease permeated his heart as well as endless regret. Suddenly, he remembered that the ninth prince had come to the Tian Yuan clan because of the information he had sent in the Jade Fragment. If the Shi Emperor looked into the matter. Sang Tu became unsettled when he thought of that. His heart was filled with fear. The fact that the princess of the Shi Empire had almost just died was directly related to him. I didn't leave my presence or name on the Jade Fragment. Moreover, the details recorded on there are already no secret. As long as I deny all claims no matter what, even the ninth prince won't have any evidence to prove that it was me, Sang Tu secretly made up his mind. At this moment, the negotiation between the two parties reached a conclusion. The two ancestral emperors of the Shi Empire arrived before the Shi Emperor. The emperor's father said, Ziyun, the Blood Sun Empire is willing to compensate Yuer with the droplet of spiritual essence of starry skies and various heavenly resources. At the same time, Yuer can take an arm of the ninth prince. The matter will end like this. The other ancestral emperor added as well, Ziyun, your father and I know that you are absolutely enraged. However, this matter hasn't developed into an unfixable mistake in the end. Moreover, the Blood Sun Empire is also an eternal empire. Their strength is roughly the same as ours. Let's just take their pride into consideration and not create a mess that can't be tidied up. It won't benefit our Shi Empire or their Blood Sun Empire at all if that happens. The benevolent face the Shi Emperor had shown to Shi Yu immediately sank when he heard that. A paramount presence radiated from him, and he said coldly, no. No matter who it is, if they touch my daughter, I will make them pay with blood. If they want to protect the ninth prince, I will use my authority as emperor to declare war against the Blood Sun Empire. You're messing around. Xiaofan's face sank. He objected it greatly. Even Xiaoming responded in a similar manner. In their eyes, the interest of the empire were everything. They could give up on their children for the sake of the empire, so how could they let the Shi emperor do something as crazy as this? Shi Ziyun's face was cold. He said emotionlessly, if that's the case, I will abdicate as emperor and cut off all ties with the Shi empire. My wife and I can still avenge our daughter without using the power of the Shi empire. The expressions of Xiaofan and Xiaoming changed with that. Even the two ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire revealed rather ugly expressions. They could hear the determination in the Shi emperor's voice. It was the type where he would never stop until he achieved his aim. Shi emperor, why don't we do this? We'll set a time frame of 10,000 years. With the talent of your esteemed princess and the nurturing of your Shi empire, she'll definitely be able to become a god king in that time frame. After that, the 9th prince of our Blood Sun Empire can engage in a battle with your esteemed princess, and we can resolve all grievances through the fight. What do you think, Shi emperor? An ancestral emperor of the Blood Sun Empire suggested. In 10,000 years' time, your 9th prince will probably have reached the primordial realm already. Our Yuer is only an over-god right now. Even if she reaches God King in 10,000 years, how will she be the 9th prince's opponent, someone who has been a god king for many years now? The empress sneered. Chapter 1991, Shi Yu's Departure. 1. The eyes of the Shi emperor turned cold. He said frigidly, you sure have done your calculations well. Let's just ignore how much longer your 9th prince has been cultivating for the time being. It was your 9th prince that injured our Yuer first, yet now you propose a battle between Yuer and your 9th prince as a resolution? Does the life of my daughter pale in value to your 9th prince? The Shi emperor's face was extremely sunken. He was furious. After he had said that, he took a step forward, and his powerful presence as a chaotic prime radiated, blanketing the people from the Blood Sun Empire in an extremely brutal method. He growled, don't you even think about me agreeing to your joke of a match. If you don't hand over the 9th prince today, I'll make your Blood Sun Empire pay a price you can't afford. The two ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire fell silent. A presence that was no weaker than the Shi emperors radiated from them, protecting their people. However, from their tightly furrowed brows, it was evident that the two ancestral emperors were internally conflicted. They were stuck in a dilemma. Although the Shi emperor had only become a chaotic prime recently, such that the two ancestral emperors were more powerful than him in terms of cultivation, they really did not dare to become his enemy. However, they could not hand over the 9th prince either. They understood the Shi emperor. Once they handed the 9th prince over, he would be dead for sure. They did not care about the lives of any of the princes in the empire. Instead, they cared about the humiliation it would bring to the Blood Sun Empire if the Shi Empire executed their 9th prince just like that. At the same time, if they executed the 9th prince over the matter, the Blood Sun Empire would still take a hit to their pride. After all, the Shi Emperor's daughter was completely fine now. She had just suffered some injuries earlier. If their Blood Sun Empire had to pay with the life of a prince, it would mean that their Blood Sun Empire was not as great as the Shi Empire. This matter was only the Shi Emperor taking revenge for his daughter. However, to the Blood Sun Empire, this was something important that related to their dignity and status. At this moment, Shi Yu said suddenly, okay, I accept your suggestion. I'll fight the 9th prince after 10,000 years. I will kill him personally during this match. There was evident killing intent directed towards the 9th prince in Shi Yu's voice. Yuer, don't be impulsive. Your father will decide for you. The empress pulled Shi Yu's hand as she looked at her. The Shi emperor also turned around to look at Shi Yu. He showed no intentions of condemning her. Instead, his gaze became filled with gentleness. He said, there's no need to wait for 10,000 years. Since the ninth prince has injured you, he won't be able to leave here today. You also can't agree to this match. Xiu shook her head. She stared at the ninth prince, who the empress had slapped into a horrible shape, and said through gritted teeth, I need to dish out this revenge personally. I want to kill him personally during a match. The Shi Emperor opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but when he saw Shiyu's determined gaze, he could only sigh helplessly. He could see Shiyu's resolution through her eyes. If he continued to try to persuade her, not only would he fail to change her mind, but it might even lead to Xiu disliking him. Naturally, the Shi Emperor did not wish to see this. Just when the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire had no idea what to do, they suddenly heard Xiu accept the match, and their eyes immediately lit up. One of them immediately said, since the esteemed princess has agreed to this, let's just leave it like this. Shi Emperor, what do you think? The Shi Emperor was helpless. He did not fear the Blood Sun Empire, nor was he afraid of declaring war against the Blood Sun Empire. However, he needed to take his daughter's feelings into account. Since she had already decided, what else could he say? I'll let the ninth prince live for another 10,000 years for now because of you. However, he may have avoided death, but he still deserves punishment. Towards the end, the Shi Emperor's eyes sharpened. He extended a finger towards the ninth prince from the distance, and a terrifying pulse of energy shot out and headed directly towards the ninth prince. Arg! The ninth prince produced a painful shriek. He directly fell out of the sky, and a bloody hole had appeared on his forehead. The Shi Emperor had injured his soul, and the power of laws from the Shi Emperor remained there. Not only would it make it difficult for him to recover from this injury, but it would also make it almost impossible for him to reach the primordial realm. Let's go. The two ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire were indifferent to this. They turned around to leave. Leave behind the spiritual essence of starry skies. The Shi Emperor called out. The spiritual essence of starry skies was good stuff. It would assist Xiu greatly. Even with his current strength, obtaining a drop of it was extremely difficult. One of the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire paused. He tossed over the bottle that contained the spiritual essence of starry skies before leaving. The emperor of the Blood Sun Empire reached for the ninth prince with a sunken face. Without saying anything, he left with the infinite primes of the empire. In the blink of an eye, all the people from the Blood Sun Empire had departed. Shi Haoming and Shi Haoxuan did not remain for long after they had departed, leaving very soon as well. In the blink of an eye, the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire and the Shi Empire were completely gone. Only the Shi Emperor's group remained. Although the storm had blown over now, the shock brought onto the people of the Tian Yuan clan from the arrival of the two groups of peak experts was tremendous. Many of them had yet to return to their senses even now. It has been tough for you during these years. Come home with mother. Mother will use the rest of her life to make it up to you. The Empress grasped Shiyu's hands tightly while her face was filled with motherly love. The Shi Emperor put the bottle of spiritual essence of starry skies away before turning around and looking at his daughter deeply. Although he did not say anything, he experienced warmth and happiness greater than he had ever felt in the past. 2,000 years. He had searched for 2,000 years, and he was finally reunited with his daughter today. This is my home. Xiu drew her hand back from the Empress, and she looked at the ruined Tian Yuan clan. She spoke very softly. The Empress choked back sobs. Xiu's coldness broke her heart. Tears pooled up in her eyes, and they almost rolled down her cheeks. No matter what, I have to thank you. Thank you for saving our Tian Yuan clan. Xiu took a few steps back slowly and bowed at the Empress and the Emperor deeply. The Empress finally broke into tears uncontrollably again from how Xiu acted, while the Shi Emperor sighed inside. He knew that his daughter was still unwilling to forgive them. However, since he had found his daughter now, he believed time could change her, that time could make her accept them. In the distance, the light in the divine king's eyes flickered. He hesitated, and in the end, he made up his mind. He stood forwards and clasped his hands. I am the divine king of the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Greetings to the Shi Emperor and the Empress. After bowing towards the two of them, the divine king looked at Shi Yu and became stern. He said, Your Highness, Jian Chen currently faces the pursuit of the vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, Huayan. His life is in danger. When she heard that Jian Chen was being hunted down, Shi Yu's face changed drastically. At that moment, she had completely forgotten about her parents and the Shi Empire. The divine king's words boomed through her head. Your Majesty, what did you say? The patriarch is currently being hunted down by a vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult? Shi Yu arrived before the divine king with a flash and asked him in disbelief. The divine king nodded. Not long ago, Huayan brought 3 late god king protectors to deal with Jian Chen. Although I kept Huayan busy, the 3 late god kings pursued Jian Chen. Although Jian Chen is a supreme over-god, he's definitely not the opponent of the 3 late god kings. It has already been quite some time since the 3 late god kings pursued him. Also, now that Huayan is no longer entangled by me, he has traveled off in Jian Chen's direction. With his speed, he has probably caught up already. Jian Chen definitely can't escape, so he'll definitely die if nothing happens. Shi Yu immediately paled after receiving the confirmation. Chapter 1992, Shi Yu's Departure. 2. The expressions of Sacred Feather, Rui Jin, Hong Lian, He Yu, and the others who had come up from the Tian Yuan continent all changed. They knew without even thinking what the outcome would be when an over-god faced the pursuit of a primordial realm expert. On the other hand, the Shi Emperor's eyes lit up when he heard that. He said, Do you have an image of Jian Chen and something that contains his presence? We do. The Patriarch's room and cultivation room should possess his residual presence, said Mo Ling. Afterwards, he led the Shi Emperor directly to where Jian Chen stayed. The Shi Emperor was a supreme expert. In Jian Chen's room, he was able to capture any residual presence without any effort. Afterwards, he immediately expanded the senses of his soul, blanketing the surroundings. Shi Yu stared at the Shi Emperor nervously. Even though she was unable to accept her parents who had appeared out of nowhere, only they could save Jian Chen now. Very soon, the Shi Emperor retracted the senses of his soul. He looked at Shi Yu and said, I've discovered Huayan outside the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, but he is injured. He was injured by people of the Blood Sun Empire. There are residual presences of Jian Chen in the imperial capital, but he's not there. However, a spatial battleship took off recently. Jian Chen's presence vanished at the spatial battleship's dock. If I've guessed correctly, he should have boarded the spatial battleship and left the cloud plain. Shi Yu and the other people of the Tian Yuan clan finally felt relieved when they heard that Jian Chen was fine. However, the Shi Emperor felt some pity. Originally, he wanted to mend his relationship with his daughter through saving Jian Chen. It could help reduce the amount of repulsion his daughter felt towards him. However, he failed to find Jian Chen. Jia Yun greets the Emperor, Empress, and Princess. Before long, a refined, middle-aged man in white robes arrived at the Tian Yuan clan. He bowed towards the 3 of them politely. Jia Yun was the radiant god king that the Shi Emperor had summoned over from the Shi Empire. He had hurried over as quickly as he could through the teleportation formations. As soon as he arrived in the Tian Yuan clan, he had learnt Shi Yu's identity from a primordial realm expert who had come with the Shi Emperor. Shi Yu immediately brought Jia Yun eagerly to where Mo Yen had died after learning he was a radiant god king. She asked frantically, Senior, can you really revive Sister Mo Yen? Jia Yun closed his eyes to sense the surroundings before smiling confidently. He clasped his fist at Shi Yu and said, although her body is destroyed, her soul has not dispersed. It still remains, so don't worry, Your Highness. Saving her won't be anything difficult. Then I'll trouble Senior Jia Yun with saving Sister Mo Yen. Shi Yu was elated. Yes, Your Highness, Jia Yun clasped his hands politely. Shi Yu was the only daughter of the Shi Emperor, so her status was naturally far greater than the past. Even though Jia Yun was a radiant god king, possessing a status greater than all other god kings in the Blood Sun Empire, he still needed to be polite to the Shi Emperor's only daughter. However, just when Jia Yun was about to revive Mo Yen, he suddenly paused. However, he returned to normal very soon. He said to Shi Yu, Your Highness, to save this person, the process must be performed in the Shi Empire where I enter seclusion. There's a formation engraved there, making the radiant force extremely abundant. Only under those circumstances will success be certain. Moreover, when I condense the soul, there's a very high chance that she will lose her memory and forget the past. As a result, to ensure that Your Highness' sister retains her memory, I will need Your Highness to constantly call her name besides me and use Your Highness' presence as a medium so that the recovered soul won't lose any past memories. Jia Yun's expression was rather unnatural. Ever since he had started cultivating, this was the first time he had told such a lengthy lie. However, he felt extremely powerless, as the Shi Emperor had ordered him to trick the princess back to the Shi Empire no matter what method he had to use. As a result, he could only spin a lie like this. In reality, it would be nothing difficult to revive Mo Yen, whose soul remained intact with his abilities as a radiant god king. Alright. Let's go immediately. Shi Yu agreed without any hesitation. She did not understand the powers of radiant god kings at all. Naturally, she did not know that there was no need to venture to the Shi Empire to save Mo Yen with Jia Yun's level of cultivation. However, Jia Yun was her only hope of saving Mo Yen. Let alone the Shi Empire, Shi Yu would even wade through danger to save Mo Yen. Let's not tarry and return right now. You don't have to worry about the Tian Yuan clan. I will get someone to safeguard the place for now, the Shi Emperor beamed. He gave Jia Yun a glance of appreciation before immediately leaving the Tian Yuan clan with Shi Yu to return to the Shi Empire. As for the two old men who had come along, one of them remained in the Tian Yuan clan. After the Shi Emperor had departed, the primordial realm experts of the Heavenly Moon Empire finally gained a chance to speak. Whether they were a part of the imperial family, or the ancestor of the Earth Spirit sect or Daoist sect of Calm Clouds, they all removed all haughtiness as primordial realm experts to express their goodwill towards the Tian Yuan clan. All of them behaved extremely politely, leaving behind various resources before leaving. Huaiyan and his 3 god kings slowly flew through the air outside the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Huaiyan's face was extremely sunken as terrifying killing intent flickered in his eyes from time to time. The 3 protectors behind him remained silent, following him in fear. The 3 of them knew that they had made the vice leader extremely furious since they had failed to stop Jian Chen, allowing him to flee to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire and board the spatial battleship in the end. A chaotic prime's presence has appeared in the divine kingdom of Pingtian. I'll go check out the situation first before wiping out the Tian Yuan clan along the way, thought Huaiyan. He directly flew towards the divine kingdom of Pingtian with the 3 god kings behind him. Jian Chen stood by a window and gazed out of it blankly. Currently, he was in the huge cabin at the bottom of the spatial battleship. He stared at the huge piece of land that rapidly shrank. The spatial battleship accelerated. As it drew further and further away, the vast land was finally completely visible. This was the first time Jian Chen had seen the cloud plain as a whole. The cloud plain was not spherical. Instead, it was a huge piece of land that floated in the sky. Land and sea occupied equal areas while the sea divided the entire piece of land into 5 regions. They formed the 5 major regions. Jian Chen looked at the southern region as if he wanted to find the Tian Yuan clan. Unfortunately, the Tian Yuan clan occupied just too small of a space with the entire southern region in perspective. He even struggled to find the territory of the divine kingdom of Pingtian from where he was. Just when Jian Chen was in a daze, a long chime suddenly rang through the cabin. With it, a haughty voice rang out, "Get to work, get to work. Quit staring at me. The ship has already entered outer space, so provide the ship with energy quickly. Don't laze around. You already know what happens if you're lazy, so I won't go into detail." Chapter 1993, The Swordswolf Adventurers. As the voice rang out, some of the people who were conversing leisurely around the cabin returned to their seats. They sat on their stone pedestal, and afterwards, they emitted powerful pulses of origin energy. At this moment, all the people in the cabin poured their origin energy into the stone pedestal. As they poured origin energy into the pedestals, Jian Chen could clearly sense the speed of the ship suddenly increase. It moved faster and faster. In the end, he discovered that all the stars outside the ship were rapidly receding from the ship as streaks of light. The stars were not moving. Instead, it was simply the ship moving too quickly. The speed of the spatial battleship has probably surpassed infinite primes. Jian Chen was secretly surprised by this. Then, he looked at the people who poured origin energy into the stone pedestals as they sat there, and he returned to his position with some doubt. Next to Jian Chen, Master Chanlong was pouring origin energy into his stone pedestal. When he saw Jian Chen and Kai Ya's confusion, he explained, "I bought the tickets to the spatial battleship under tight conditions, and it was not cheap, so I only managed to get 3 low-class tickets. All the people in the low-class cabin need to pour origin energy into the stone pedestals every second day. The stone pedestals are linked to powerful formations. All the origin energy that enters the stone pedestal will be taken to the formation that powers the spatial battleship to be used as fuel." Master Chanlong looked at Jian Chen and Kaya, who still did nothing, and said with some helplessness, "Although the price of taking this low-class cabin is cheap, we have to provide energy for the spatial battleship's movement. This was a condition that came with the ticket. If we don't do this, our right to ride the spatial battleship will be revoked, and we will be thrown out. Can we upgrade our flight to a higher class?" Jian Chen asked. He did not have enough divine crystals to take a teleportation formation to a different plane, but he believed he could afford to fly at a higher class. After all, he had obtained a large amount of divine crystals from Yashi Lian. As the commander of the 7th Army, Yashi Lian was far richer than regular god kings. Even after he went on a shopping spree in the Xiandao Empire, he had only used up a small fraction of the divine crystals from Yashi Lian's space ring. "They're already full, so we can't upgrade even if we can afford it. We can only move up if the people in the other classes leave or die," said Chanlong. Jian Chen nodded slightly before sitting down on the stone pedestal. He did not copy the other people by pouring his own energy into the stone pedestal. Instead, he removed a large number of thumb-sized high-grade divine crystals from his space ring. As soon as the divine crystals came in contact with the stone pedestal, the pure origin energy within would be drained away. Jian Chen cultivated chaotic force. It was far more precious than the origin energy that other fighters cultivated. Naturally, he would not pour that into the stone pedestal. As a result, he would rather replace it with divine crystals than use up his own chaotic force. However, Jian Chen's actions attracted the attention of everyone in the cabin. At that moment, everyone's attention was locked onto Jian Chen. It was not that no one used divine crystals in place of their own origin energy. They were just extremely rare, and they would only use low-grade divine crystals. However, they had not even heard of a person who would directly use high-grade divine crystals like Jian Chen. At that moment, a lot of people looked over enviously. Some of them were jealous. The divine crystals that Jian Chen had taken out were quite a large sum to many of the people present. What an idiot. He's using high-grade divine crystals in place of his own origin energy. I'd like to see how long he can last. I'm certain that he won't even be able to last for 3 days. As time goes on, even God Kings can't afford to burn high-grade divine crystals like that. A few people discussed softly, but naturally, Jian Chen heard all of it. Jian Chen did not speak up about this. However, he also felt very helpless because apart from high-grade divine crystals, he only had supreme-grade divine crystals in his space ring. Moreover, he did not have many loose pieces of divine crystals. Basically, all of them were blocks. In the blink of an eye, the spatial battleship had already flown through outer space for close to a month. Jian Chen used high-grade divine crystals continuously during that time to replace his own energy. He had used up several tens of thousand divine crystals. The people who believed that Jian Chen would not be able to last long gradually changed their minds after they saw how Jian Chen had used several tens of thousand high-grade divine crystals in the span of less than a month. Greed and burning desire appeared in their gazes towards Jian Chen. People who treated several tens of thousand high-grade divine crystals like nothing clearly possessed an extremely large sum of divine crystals. One day consumes over 2,000 high-grade divine crystals. I need to spend half a month each month pouring in energy, so a month should consume between 30 to 40,000 high-grade divine crystals. That's close to 500,000 in a year and 1,000,000 in 2 years, which is a block of high-grade divine crystal. Jian Chen calculated his expenses. Burning through a single block of high-grade divine crystal every 2 years was nothing to him right now because let alone high-grade divine crystals, just the supreme-grade divine crystals he possessed amounted to several dozen blocks. A single block of supreme-grade divine crystal could be converted into 100 blocks of high-grade divine crystal. At this moment, 7 people in tight black robes appeared before Jian Chen. They surrounded him, and a middle-aged man smiled. "Brother, may I ask you where you come from and which sect you come from?" Jian Chen had already sensed their intentions. He could tell from their almost identical attires that they probably belonged to the same organization. In the spatial battleship, there were over 30 other people in the same attires apart from the 7 of them. However, the 7 people around him right now were the stronger ones. They were all over gods. The other people in similar attires were below over god. I am just a wanderer. I have no sect or master. There's no need for me to mention my name. It's not worth remembering, said Jian Chen calmly as he remained seated on the stone pedestal. Now that he had left the cloud plane, he was indeed a wanderer. Master Chanlong and Kaya opened their eyes at that moment as well, staring at the 7 people coldly. The 7 men naturally sensed that Jian Chen was with Chanlong and Kaya. However, they did not mind at all. After they learned that Jian Chen was only an independent cultivator, the eyes of the middle-aged man who had spoken earlier lit up. He said, "We're the Swords Wolf adventurers. The captain and the 2 elders are currently at the high-class cabin and they're all god kings. Brother, would you be interested in joining our group? Although we're not a peak organizations, we're still one with 3 god kings. Would you be interested?" As they said that, a pressure radiated from the 7 of them, slowly approaching Jian Chen. Although the middle-aged man had spoken rather politely, the forcefulness in his words was evident. He was basically threatening Jian Chen. Chapter 1994, Arena of Life and Death. Once you join us, I have countless methods to kill you. At that time, it doesn't matter how many divine crystals you have on you. It'll all be mine, the middle-aged man sneered secretly. Naturally, he had come for Jian Chen's divine crystals. Seeing how Jian Chen treated the high-grade divine crystals like nothing, he knew that Jian Chen was extremely wealthy, having probably obtained it all through luck. As for Chanlong and Kaya, who were with Jian Chen, the middle-aged man did not take them seriously at all, even though they were over-gods and no weaker than any of his companions. This was because they were the Swords Wolf adventurers. They had 3 god kings, and aside from that, his brothers who had stood forward with him were no ordinary people either. They possessed a combination attack that basically made them invincible below god kings when used. Even against opponents who outnumbered them, they would be able to emerge victoriously. "I have no interest," Jian Chen said extremely calmly. Even though he knew the Swords Wolf adventurers possessed 3 god kings, he did not care at all. As long as he did not encounter late god kings, they would not be able to pose too great of a threat to him. Moreover, late god kings would not just appear this easily. Moreover, he had already learnt from Chanlong that fighting was prohibited on the spatial battleship, so it did not matter even if the Swords Wolf adventurers possessed late god kings. The rules of the spatial battleship still bound them, preventing them from fighting. The middle-aged seemed to have expected Jian Chen's declination. His face did not change, and he said, "Our Swords Wolf adventurers possesses some fame and prestige. We're a group of rather powerful adventurers. Sir, are you turning down our invitation because you're looking down on us? Any person who looks down on our Swords Wolf adventures will suffer horrible consequences. Brother, you better consider it well." From behind, a gloomy young man who seemed to be approaching his 30s said gruffly. There was a vague sense of killing intent. "Aren't you going overboard? We don't want to join, so you assume it to be looking down on you. Do all the people you want to join have to join?" Kaya stood up and said furiously. That's right. Our Swords Wolf adventurers just likes going overboard, so what? The young man sneered. He stared at Kaya and scoffed, "But you don't have to worry, girl. Not anyone can join our Swords Wolf adventurers. Your cultivation is just barely enough, but your appearance," the young man sighed when he reached there, after spending some time in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire of the southern region of the Cloud Plain, "I have seen plenty of beautiful women. It has taken my tastes to a whole new level. Now that I've seen your appearance, I really can't let you join us because the women we had fun with in the brothels of the imperial capital were hundreds of times prettier than you. If I let you join us, our Swords Wolf adventurers will probably be completely humiliated." That's right. Our Swords Wolf adventurers is a group with some fame after all. We can't just let an extremely ugly woman join. Otherwise, we won't be able to show ourselves in the future. Woman, quit staring at us. You won't get invited even if you stare at us like that because your face really makes us troubled. The people of the Swords Wolf adventurers laughed aloud. Gradually, the topic of the conversation began to revolve around Kaya. They scoffed and scorned her as they pleased. Kaya paled in fury. She was a woman before being an over-god. Since most women cared about their appearance, the scathing words of the Swords Wolf adventurers made her extremely furious. Indeed, Kaya's beauty was not breathtaking. She could not compete with Fairy Haoyu, Shangguan Mu'er, and so on. Even the 2 princesses of the Xiandao Empire, Xing'er and Lan'er, were prettier than her. However, she was still pretty, nowhere near as bad as the people from the Swords Wolf adventurers had described. Seeing the Swordsworth adventures humiliate Kaya, Jian Chen experienced heavy killing intent. He turned towards Chanlong emotionlessly and asked, "Master Chanlong, is there any way to kill them?" Master Chanlong's face was ugly as well. The vague sense of familiarity he felt from Kaya had already made him treat her as his best friend. Now that his best friend was being harassed, he also experienced killing intent. There's an arena of life and death set up on the spatial battleship. There are no rules there. As such, once you enter it, you can kill to your heart's content without breaking any rules of the spatial battleship, said Master Chanlong. He seemed to know what Jian Chen wanted to do, so he stood up from his stone pedestal. Jian Chen stared at the Swords Wolf adventurers and said emotionlessly, haven't you deliberately come to provoke us for my space ring? I can give you a chance to obtain all my wealth. In the arena of life and death, if you can kill me, then Jianchen directly took out a block of supreme-grade divine crystal and tossed it onto the ground when he reached there. He continued, then all my wealth in my space ring belongs to you. This block of supreme-grade divine crystal is only a portion of it. I just wonder whether you have the courage to come get it or not. The block of supreme-grade divine crystal was placed before Jianchen. The huge crystal was transparent, and it shone with a dense, hazy light. Pure origin energy pulsed, causing all the people in the cabin to become green with envy. They all stared right at the block of divine crystal. This was a block of supreme-grade divine crystal, 1 meter in length, width, and depth. Let alone supreme-grade, many people in the cabin had not even seen a high-grade divine crystal the size of this. All the people from the Swordswolf adventurers stared at the block of supreme-grade divine crystal as well. Desire filled their eyes. They knew that Kaya and Jianchen were together, which was why they made fun of Kaya to aggravate Jianchen, forcing him into the arena of life and death. They had never thought they would achieve their goal so easily. We accept your challenge. Let's go to the arena of life and death, the Swordswolf adventurers agreed without hesitation. Even though there were people amongst them that could already sense that something was off, they ignored it very quickly before the temptations of supreme-quality divine crystals. Although they could not tell Jianchen's level of cultivation, they knew he was not a god king from his presence alone. They had no need to fear as long as they did not encounter god kings. Moreover, even if he were a god king, it did not matter. There were no rules in the arena of life and death. If the 7 of them combined their strength, they could remain tangled with god kings for a while through their various techniques. That time would be enough for their captain to arrive. Jianchen, Kaya, and Chanlong set off for the arena of life and death with the 7 overgods. Behind them were the several dozen members of the Swordswolf adventurers below overgod. After they had left, the remaining people in the cabin hesitated before quite a few people followed them away as well. They had gone to watch. At the same time, in a luxurious room filled with origin energy within the high-class cabins of the spatial battleship, a scarred, muscular man in tight, red robes sat on a jade bed. He was the captain of the Swordswolf adventurers, known by others as the Wolf King. Suddenly, the man's face changed, and he slowly opened his eyes. He took out a jade talisman from his space ring and scanned it with the senses of his soul. Xiaofan and the others have caught a big fish in the low-class cabin. He actually holds a block of supreme-grade divine crystal at the very least, and he is already in the arena of life and death. Yes, that's a big fish indeed. Xiaofan and the others have done well. I gotta properly reward them later, the Wolf King was elated. Even to him, a god king, a block of supreme-grade divine crystal was wealth that he could not ignore. However, the Wolf King furrowed his brows soon after. He murmured, not only does the target hold a block of supreme-grade divine crystal at the very least, but he's not afraid of the challenge either. It looks like he might be a difficult target. I have to go have a look, just in case the big fish escapes. The Wolf King immediately left the room. He summoned the other 2 god kings of the Swordswolf adventurers and went to the arena of life and death together with them. The arena of life and death was located in the central region of the spatial battleship. This was also the busiest and most prosperous area of the entire ship. Shops, food, and entertainment all gathered here, making it seem like a miniature, bustling city. The arena of life and death was located in the central region of the spatial battleship. This was also the busiest and most prosperous area of the entire ship. Shops, food, and entertainment all gathered here, making it seem like a miniature, bustling city. Not only was there free trade here for various cultivation methods, battle skills, treasures, and so on, but there was also delicious food made from the meat of various huge space beasts. It would draw in a large number of diners every day. Jianchen, Kaya, and Chanlong made their way through the bustling region of trade with the people from the Swords Wolf adventurers. They headed directly towards the arena of life and death. The arena of life and death was a circular platform that was 1,000 meters wide. A barrier surrounded the entire place, and it was so powerful that even god kings would struggle to make it tremble. As soon as they arrived here, the gloomy young man who had mocked Kaya directly leapt onto the platform. As for the 6 other overgods of the Swords Wolf adventurers, they surrounded Jianchen, Kaya, and Chanlong to cut off their path of retreat. They wanted to prevent them from running away suddenly. "I'm already in the arena of life and death. Brat, weren't you pretty arrogant earlier? You boasted that you would kill us. Now that your opportunity is right before you, come in here." The gloomy young man stood in the arena as he stared at Jianchen in provocation. "The 3 of you are already here. Surely, you're not considering to flee now? You haven't been frightened by our Swords Wolf adventurers, right? Look at the 3 of them. You can tell with a single glance that they're cowards." The 6 people who surrounded Jianchen and the others all scoffed. From how nervous they seemed, they appeared to be afraid that Jianchen really would flee now. They did not pay any attention to Kaya and Chanlong. Their main target was only Jianchen. A cold light and killing intent flickered through Jianchen's eyes as he listened to the various remarks from the people. With a gentle leap, he took to the air and passed through the barrier around the arena of life and death with no obstruction. He stood in the arena now. There were no restrictions on the people who used the arena of life and death in the spatial battleship. It did not matter if people were fighting in it already, as people could enter from outside whenever they wished to engage in a death match with their opponents. Once the death match began, it would continue until someone died. Only those victorious could leave the arena alive. Defeat meant death. Seeing how Jianchen had really entered the arena of life and death, the eyes of the Swords Wolf adventurers lit up. They were elated. Once he had entered the arena of life and death, it would mean that the death match had begun. Unless he was victorious, he could not leave. Sir, you really are impressive." The people of the Swords Wolf adventurers laughed aloud. Afterwards, the 6 other overgod leapt into the arena as well. They had never even considered fighting Jianchen alone. They were already prepared to rush him together once Jianchen entered the arena of life and death. They would surround him until he died. Once Jianchen died in the arena, all his wealth would become theirs. "Jianchen, leave that person to me. I want to teach him a lesson personally," Kaya said to Jianchen secretly. She and Master Chanlong had entered the arena together. She glared at the young man who had scoffed at her before, and killing intent surged out. People had already begun to gather around the arena gradually. They pointed at the people in the arena and conversed softly. As it was 7 against 3, many people felt the odds were against Jianchen and his group. The Swords Wolf adventurers were quite famous here. Many people knew they possessed a combined attack, allowing them to defeat people more powerful than them. Moreover, these people were not all the Swords Wolf adventurers. There were 3 god kings who supported them. Although this type of organization was nowhere close to the apex, it was considered quite powerful on the spatial battleship. Spirit and body fusion. It was also at this moment that the people from the Swords Wolf adventurers began to move. They yelled out together, and the 7 overgods fell into specific positions as quickly as they could. They were prepared to use their combined attack. Once we use the technique, those 3 people are dead for sure. Even if we're unlucky, and we come across a supreme overgod who is on the overgod's plaque, we'll be able to fend them off. All we need to do is keep them busy until the captain makes it here. By then, even supreme overgods will be doomed. That block of supreme-grade divine crystal belongs to our Swords Wolf adventurers, and I heard that the kiddo seems to have more than that. We've struck big money. The 7 over-gods were excited inside as if all of Jian Chen's wealth was already theirs. Just as they dreamed about just how many supreme-grade divine crystals they were about to obtain, a terrifying presence filled with destruction suddenly appeared. Kaya reached out with her right hand, and a sword immediately condensed out of purely the laws of destruction. It produced a terrifying presence before turning into a black streak of light, shooting towards the young man who had insulted her earlier with lightning speed. Although Kaya had only grasped the power of laws recently, she had mastered its usage. Her usage even surpassed Jian Chen's usage of the laws of the sword. No one could match up to her. As a result, not only was it a piece of cake for her to use the laws of destruction like it was second nature, but the power of all the laws she used, whether it was the laws of fire, laws of destruction, or laws of creation, was extremely pure, without any contaminants at all. Their power had completely exceeded the same laws from any cultivator at the same level. The laws of destruction moved extremely quickly. In the tiny space of the arena, it was basically instantaneous. With a flash, the laws of destruction had approached the young man. Bang! With that, the laws of destruction had already pierced the young man's head before he could react, and it exploded right after. It blasted the young man's head to pieces as red and white matter flew everywhere. Before they could even use their combined attack, one of them had already died. Clearly, this had surprised all of them, causing them to tarry slightly. They all looked at the headless corpse of the young man as disbelief filled their faces. Just a single strike had claimed the life of one of their companions. Just what was this strength? Everyone looked at Kaya as they were absolutely astounded. Only now did they realize just how terrifying of a person they had provoked. She had managed to kill one of their companions with the first strike, and they were unable to react at all. Even most of the supreme over-gods on the over-gods plaque were not able to do something like that. Just as they were stunned, the clear thrum of a sword rang out. Jian Chen had arrived before them as a blur with the startling rainbow sword, stabbing out with lightning speed. Spurt. Faced with Jian Chen's attack, they were unable to block at all. Just that one strike pierced the head of one of them. Jian Chen had killed one of their companions with lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 7 confident over-gods of the Swords Wolf adventurers had already died. They had been slain in a single strike by Kaya and Jian Chen. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 7 confident over-gods of the Swords Wolf adventurers had already died. They had been slain in a single strike by Kaya and Jian Chen. The people of the Swords Wolf adventurers were not the only ones shocked. Even the observers below were dumbfounded. Retreat. The 5 remaining people paled in fright. Now that they could not use their combined attack, they retreated as quickly as they could. Jian Chen charged up. The startling rainbow sword turned into a blur as he stabbed towards a second person. Jian Chen's strike was just too fast. It had surpassed the speed that the naked eye could capture. Although the over-gods could sense it with their soul, they were powerless against it. Spurt. Jian Chen's sword directly plunged into the head of a second over-god. In less than a few seconds, Jian Chen had already claimed the life of 2 over-gods. At the same time, Kaya had caught up as well. With a wave of her hand, the laws of destruction condensed, and she struck out without any mercy at all. Her palm strike struck a person's head and terrifying laws of destruction surged. It directly dispersed his soul and cracked his head. Even though Jian Chen and his group faced the Swords Wolf adventurers 3 against 7 in the arena of life and death, their strengths were on completely different levels. Even though there were 2 late over-gods among the 7 of them, they were regular late over-gods at most. Let alone the difference from supreme over-gods, but even the prodigies of some large sects were far more powerful than them. As a result, the battle was one-sided, or more correctly, it was not a battle, but a one-sided slaughter. Instantly, Only the middle-aged man who had approached Jian Chen first remained among the 7 of them. The middle-aged man was called Xiaofan. Even though he was a late over god, making him one of the most powerful among the 7, he could not help but pale in fright when he faced Jian Chen and Kaya right now. Chills ran down his spine while his forehead had already become covered with a thin layer of sweat. Out of the 7 over gods, only he remained in the blink of an eye. Just who did they provoke? Right now, Xiaofan was filled with regret. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Brother, it was my wrong earlier. I, Xiaofan, will apologize to you right here and make it up to you. I hope you can be the bigger man and spare my life, Xiaofan basically begged with a trembling voice. Spare your life? Jian Chen sneered. He glared at Xiaofan and said, isn't your Swords Wolf adventurers pretty powerful? Provoking us purposefully and forcing us into the arena of life and death. We're standing in the arena of life and death now, so why are you begging for forgiveness now? Humph. Don't get cocky because the people begging for forgiveness will become you very soon. At this moment, a growl filled with killing intent rang out. The scarred captain of the Swords Wolf adventurers, the Wolf King, had arrived at the arena of life and death with his 2 other god kings. The 3 of them seemed to be striding along steadily, but they would cross hundreds of meters with each step. With just a few steps, the 3 of them directly passed through the barrier and arrived in the arena. Once they had entered the arena of life and death, it would mean a death match had begun. No one could leave until victory was decided. Captain. Xiaofan's eyes immediately lit up with the Wolf King's arrival. It was as if he saw a bright lantern in the dark night, gaining hope and confidence. As the attention of Jian Chen, Kaya, and Master Chanlong was drawn towards the Wolf King, a vicious light flickered through Xiaofan's eyes. He silently took out a dagger and stabbed it towards Jian Chen's heart. The dagger flickered with a gloomy blue light. It gave off an icy-cold presence, which was enough to cause people to feel chills. It had been covered with an extremely powerful poison. Xiaofan's sneak attack was unexpectedly successful. The dagger directly pierced through Jian Chen's clothes, and the sharp blade landed on Jian Chen's chest. Xiaofan was secretly overjoyed when he saw that his sneak attack had succeeded. However, his face froze very soon as he stared at Jian Chen's chest with widened eyes. Disbelief filled his face. Although his dagger had stabbed at Jian Chen's chest, it did not penetrate anything. It did not even make it through his skin. In particular, the great resistance he felt in his right hand was like he had stabbed at a steel wall instead. How is this possible? Xiaofan was extremely shocked inside. Jian Chen had blocked his sneak attack with his body alone. He had never seen or even heard of such a powerful body before. However, before Xiaofan could think too much about it, a streak of light rapidly expanded in his eyes. A strand of sword qi shot out from Jian Chen's hand, piercing Xiaofan's forehead. Stop! The Wolf King cried out furiously from nearby. He had already charged over as a blur in an attempt to save Xiaofan from Jian Chen. However, he was too late. The sword qi from Jian Chen's hand directly left behind a bloody hole in Xiaofan's forehead. It had entered his soul and wiped it out on the spot. The Wolf King howled out angrily, and his pupils became silver white. The presence from him surged as he charged at Jian Chen murderously. His right hand turned into a claw as the laws of a god king descended. He swung it at Jian Chen's head mercilessly. During all that, his 5 fingers had silently turned into 5 claws that shone with cold light. Jian Chen's face did not change. He remained calm and composed. He formed a seal with his hand, and a golden strand of sword qi condensed. It shot off as a dazzling streak of light. Boom! With a heavy sound, the sword qi collided with the claws of the Wolf King, making his body tremble. He staggered backwards uncontrollably as a vicious slash appeared on his right hand. It left behind a white mark on his 5 long claws. "Since you've already entered the arena of life and death, only the victorious can leave," Jian Chen said coldly. He took a step out and appeared before the Wolf King like he had teleported. He slashed the startling rainbow sword to prevent the Wolf King from escaping. "I never thought I'd meet a supreme overgod here," the Wolf King was stern. He howled out, and his body rapidly swelled at the same time. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a silver-white wolf that was 10 meters in length. 9 bone-like swords stood on the wolf's back. They shone with cold light as they pulsed with powerful energy. The captain of the Swords Wolf adventurers was not a human. He was a Swords Wolf. Moreover, now that the captain had reverted to his original form, his presence had clearly become stronger. Including the captain, there were a total of 3 god kings among the Sword Wolf adventurers. Just when the captain started fighting Jian Chen, the 2 other god kings struck out as well. Including the captain, there were a total of 3 god kings among the Sword Wolf adventurers. Just when the captain started fighting Jian Chen, the 2 other god kings struck out as well. Naturally, Kaya and Chanlong would not watch on idly. They struck out as well, keeping a god king busy each. Although Kaya was only an over-god, and she had only reached godhood recently, her battle prowess was no worse than Jian Chen's. Her control and usage of laws even amazed Jian Chen. As a result, as soon as Kaya began fighting the God King, she was equally matched with him, and she even gained the upper hand from time to time. The 3 God Kings of the Swords Wolf adventurers were not particularly powerful. They were no prodigies, and they were all just early God Kings. As a result, when Jian Chen and Kaya faced off against them, it was different from when they were being hunted down by the 3 protectors of the Empyrean demon cult. At that time, they basically could not fight back at all. Compared to Jian Chen and Kaya's ease, Master Chanlong suffered much more. He had completely lost the upper hand. If it were not for the assistance from the soul trapped in the formation banners, which had materialized into a giant python, Master Chanlong probably would have become heavily injured just from the God King's attacks. After all, he was a formations master. He specialized in casting down formations and attacking people like that. Master Chanlong held a simple, azure disc. He worked with the trapped soul against the God King as his hands constantly changed between seals. He tossed out formation banners one after another to cast down formations as quickly as possible. In an open battle, Master Chanlong would probably struggle to defeat opponents of the same cultivation realm, but if he could cast down his formations, he could kill God Kings easily. As they fought in the arena of life and death, violent booms rang out constantly. Powerful pulses of energy ravaged the arena, surprising many of the people who had gathered around it. As the news that God Kings were fighting in the arena of life and death spread, more and more people gathered around it. However, without any exception, all the observing people were stunned and shocked. 3 overgods were fighting against 3 God Kings, and 2 of them were even equally matched with their God King opponents, seemingly gaining the upper hand from time to time. This sight brought unimaginable shock to all the people watching. To be able to fend off God Kings as overgods, the 3 of them must be supreme overgods from the overgods plaque. The young man and woman are especially impressive. I even suspect them to be ranked first on the overgods plaque. We don't know just how powerful the person ranked first is, but I am confident that the young man and woman are ranked within the top 10, no, the top 3. Many people were amazed as they sighed in surprise around the arena. At this moment, a great wolf howl rang out. The Wolf King and Jian Chen's battle had reached a level of great intensity. The Wolf King was already doused in blood. Vicious slashes covered his body, and out of the 9 bone swords on his back, only 6 remained. Jian Chen had cut off 3. However, Jian Chen's clothes were torn as well and splashed with blood. It was no longer possible to distinguish whether the blood was his or the Wolf King's. At this moment, at the very top of the spatial battleship, 3 old men sat within a well-decorated room. The 3 old men seemed extremely simple. Their presences were concealed, making them seem like ordinary people. However, their eyes were extraordinary. Their simple-looking pupils would become as vast and profound as the universe from time to time. 3 over-gods against 3 god-kings. This is extremely rare. I never thought that something as interesting as this would happen on our spatial battleship, the sunlit dawn. A white-robed, ruddy old man chuckled. Beside the white-robed old man, there was another wrinkly old man in linen robes. He nodded in agreement and sighed in amazement. Just the 3 over-gods that they've encountered randomly are actually so powerful. Not only does that woman's usage of the laws of destruction and laws of fire make me admire her in particular, but the young man who uses the sword is extremely outstanding as well. I wonder what cultivation method he practices. I can sense a brutal power different from the laws of destruction from him. As for that old man, although there's nothing outstanding about him, the formations he casts down are extremely impressive. Sigh, it has been quite a long time since I've moved around in the world. Are all the juniors of this generation this impressive? Not all of them are this outstanding. There just happens to be a few of them together, said the last old man in red robes. He was the old man who had repelled Huaiyan for Jian Chen and destroyed one of Huaiyan's arms. It's quite rare to see such a fascinating show where 3 over-gods fight 3 god-kings at the same time. Hong Emo, Mu He, if we don't have some fun when there's something so interesting going on, it'll be too great of a pity. Why don't we have a bet? The white-robed, ruddy old man chuckled. He continued, they seem to be some Swords Wolf adventurers. Out of the 3 god-kings, only the Swords Wolf is barely eye-catching. He possesses a shred of the bloodline of the ancient Sky Wolf. In particular, his last bone sword has condensed a sliver of the bloodline's power. As a result, once it erupts, he'll be able to kill almost all early god-kings. Only those prodigies can stop it. Let's bet on who will emerge victorious between the Swords Wolf and the kiddo with the sword. Do we still need to gamble? The young man with the sword matches the Swords Wolf evenly and gains the upper hand from time to time, but that's only because the Swords Wolf hasn't used the power of his bloodline. Once he uses that, even if the kid survives, he'll be left half alive. Of course, that's given that the woman with the laws of fire and destruction and the old man with the formations don't provide assistance. The wrinkly Mu He in linen robes shot a glance over and said in some displeasure. The red-robed old man who had saved Jian Chen, Hong Emo, smiled faintly. He said, since the battle is still ongoing, we naturally don't know who will win. Let's bet. Let's see who will win. I'll isolate the 3 of them so that they can't work together against the Swords Wolf. Please place your bets. I'll bet a piece of true metal of Buddha on the Swords Wolf. I'll bet a first-grade god-tier healing pill on the Swords Wolf as well. The 2 old men placed their bets very soon. They both chose the Swords Wolf. Hong Emo smiled faintly and said, since you've both chosen the Swords Wolf, I naturally can't copy you. I choose the young man with the sword. I'll bet that he will win. Hong Emo, it's your loss for sure this time. That sliver of power from the bloodline of the ancient Sky Wolf cannot be underestimated. The power from the bloodline of the ancient Sky Wolf is indeed very powerful, except the power condensed in the 9th bone sword is only a sliver of it. If he uses it well, he can indeed claim to be invincible among his cultivation level. However, if he doesn't, Hong Emo smiled profoundly. The powerful senses of his soul had already enveloped the entire arena of life and death. He was already paying close attention to Jian Chen and the Swords Wolf. The power from the bloodline of the ancient Sky Wolf is indeed very powerful, except the power condensed in the 9th bone sword is only a sliver of it. If he uses it well, he can indeed claim to be invincible among his cultivation level. However, if he doesn't, Hong Mo smiled profoundly. The powerful senses of his soul had already enveloped the entire arena of life and death. He was already paying close attention to Jian Chen and the Swords Wolf. It looks like the Swords Wolf isn't in Hong Mo's favor. Since that's the case, let's just see. I refuse to believe that a God King Swords Wolf with the power of the ancient Sky Wolf's bloodline will lose to an over-god. The battle between Jian Chen and the Wolf King grew more and more intense in the arena of life and death. They had already become blurs. They clashed so quickly that many over-gods were unable to see their figures. They could only grasp them through the senses of their souls. It had to be mentioned that the Wolf King was very powerful. Although Jian Chen had already fought with several early god kings in the past, they paled in comparison to the Wolf King in terms of battle experience. As the captain of a group of adventurers, the Wolf King had experienced far more battles and life-or-death situations than many disciples of large sections. Coupled with the Wolf King's special bloodline and his body as a magical beast, he possessed battle prowess that exceeded most human god kings. In the end, it led to the battle between Jian Chen and the Wolf King being especially difficult. At this moment, an extremely powerful pulse of energy appeared in the arena of life and death. 5 of the 6 remaining bone swords on the Wolf King's back suddenly shone with a silver-white light. Extremely violent energy filled each bone sword as they stabbed out suddenly with lightning speed. Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. With a long whistle, he formed a fist with his left hand and struck out with the laws of the sword and chaotic force to stop the bone sword that shot towards his forehead. Immediately, blood splashed, and his left hand was reduced to a mess. The bones in his hand had basically all shattered. The 4 remaining bone swords emitted surging pulses as they extended over as blurs, arriving before Jian Chen instantly. Jian Chen did not try to dodge the 4 bone swords. Determination flooded his eyes. He charged up in a straight posture and directly allowed his body to be hit. The startling rainbow sword in his right hand shone brightly as he cleaved it towards the Wolf King's head with lightning speed. Jian Chen wanted to trade attacks. The Wolf King clearly understood Jian Chen's intentions. Craziness appeared in his eyes as well. He was ready to trade blows too. Spurt. 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 The 4 bone swords passed through Jian Chen's body at basically the same time. The white bones emerged from Jian Chen's back. Now, they were dyed red. Blood dripped from them, where each droplet pulsed with powerful energy. However, Jian Chen did not even let out a grunt. Blood dripped down from the corner of his lips as the sword in his right hand stabbed towards the Wolf King's forehead with lightning speed. Like a flash of light, it arrived before the Wolf King's forehead in a split second. At this critical moment, the Wolf King twisted his head slightly, dodging Jian Chen's fatal strike. In the end, the strike stabbed his neck. The stream of sword chi almost severed the Wolf King's head, only leaving a flap of skin that kept it together. It was also this moment that Jian Chen suddenly froze. The 4 bone swords in his body suddenly erupted with power as if they wanted to tear his body to pieces. Blood gushed out from his wounds. Chaotic force circulated through Jian Chen. He pushed the defenses of the chaotic body to the limit to endure this power from the bone swords as he swung the startling rainbow sword at the Wolf King's back. Ding! With that sound, the 5 other bone swords on the Wolf King's back were all severed. 8 of the 9 bone swords were broken now. Only 1 remained. Jian Chen struck out extremely quickly. After breaking the 5 bone swords, the startling rainbow sword turned into a blur once again as he cleaved at the Wolf King's head. Killing me won't be that easy. Let alone you, a mere over-god, even if you become a god king, you won't be able to kill me because I have the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. It will be your honor to die to this power. At this moment, the Wolf King's voice rang out. The voice was filled with deep resentment. The Wolf King needed to pay an extremely heavy price and lose much of his vitality to use the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. He had never thought a mere overgod would force him to a point like this. However, he had no choice. This overgod was just too great. He even suspected that the supreme overgod ranked first on the overgod's plaque would not have an easy battle against him. With that, a force of destruction so powerful that it frightened even Jian Chen suddenly appeared. The ninth bone sword on the Wolf King's back suddenly shone with dazzling red light. The terrifying power slumbering in there suddenly awakened. Jian Chen stared at the Wolf King's ninth bone sword, and he became extremely stern. He felt the presence of death from the ninth bone sword. The power that had awakened within it startled him. However, in the next moment, Jian Chen gritted his teeth and continued what he was doing. He stabbed his sword towards the Wolf King's head. As long as he destroyed the Wolf King's soul, the Wolf King would not be able to use his ability regardless of how powerful it was. However, just when Jian Chen's sword had stabbed out halfway, he saw a dazzling red light. The light was so powerful that it passed through the barrier around the arena of life and death and dyed the entire space there red. The red light from the ninth bone sword shone brightly, right at Jian Chen. Jian Chen immediately froze. Now that the red light had locked onto him, he actually felt like he had been immobilized. Even when he struggled as hard as he could and circulated his chaotic force furiously, he was unable to recover his freedom. The presence of death rapidly drew closer. Jian Chen. To one side, Kaya had already completed her battle. She had slain a God King Elder with a sword condensed from the laws of destruction. Sensing that Jian Chen was in danger, she immediately cried out and charged over as quickly as possible. Master Chanlong had also cast down his formation, trapping the other elder of the Swords Wolf adventurers. Seeing how the red light had completely immobilized Jian Chen, his face changed as well. He immediately tossed his azure disc over. However, before Kaya could approach Jian Chen, she seemed to hit a barrier. She was knocked away. An invisible wall stood before her, seemingly splitting the arena into two worlds, preventing her from approaching Jian Chen. On the other side, Master Chanlong's azure disc struck the barrier as well. Just like Kaya, he was unable to approach Jian Chen at all. At this moment, the red light from the ninth bone sword had almost reached Jian Chen's forehead. The situation was critical. At this critical moment, an extremely powerful sword intent suddenly appeared. It permeated the entire space, causing the expressions of all the people watching on to change drastically. At this critical moment, an extremely powerful sword intent suddenly appeared. It permeated the entire space, causing the expressions of all the people watching on to change drastically. Two strands of finger-sized sword chi had appeared above Jian Chen's head, shining with blinding light. The strands of sword chi were small, but the power they gave off was shocking. It filled all the overgods present with fear, and even the expressions of the God Kings changed. That kid with the sword is about to die. It's just like what I said. Not only is that Swords Wolf a God King, but it also possesses the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. The kid is definitely not his opponent. Hong Mo, it's your loss this time, the white-robed old man smiled at the top of the spatial battleship. Although the kid with the sword is going to lose to the Swords Wolf, it's extremely impressive for him to force a God King Swords Wolf to such state as an overgod. If the Swords Wolf did not possess the bloodline of the ancient Sky Wolf, allowing him to use the bloodline's power, he definitely would not have been able to defeat the young man, Mu-He said gently. Pity filled his face. Mu-He, why are you acting all melancholy? What is there to be depressed about? The Saints' world is so big, and there are so many prodigies out there, but how many people are truly able to make it to the peak? Don't most of them die along the way? Across the years, who knows how many glorious prodigies have died before me? I've grown numb to it, the white-robed old man said calmly. Then, he looked at Hong Imo, and a sliver of excitement appeared in his eyes. He said, "You've lost the best, Hong Imo. According to what you promised us before, you'd give us 2 third-grade God-tier healing pills, right?" The white-robed old man paused when he reached there. A sliver of surprise appeared on his face, and he could not help but cry out, "What is this sword chi? It's actually so powerful. How can a sword chi like that appear from an over-god?" At that moment, the indifferent Hong Imo also revealed a slight smile. He murmured to himself, "I knew it." For the vice-leader of the Empyrean demon cult, Huayan, to personally hunt him down, he definitely can't be as simple as he seems. Victory remains undecided. As soon as the 2 strands of profound sword chi appeared above Jian Chen's head, they shot off like 2 bolts of lightning. Distance seemed negligible before it, and it collided with the red light in a single flash. Boom! The 2 strands of profound sword chi both dispersed, instantly vanishing. The red light from the 9th bone sword of the Wolf King was clearly much more powerful than Jian Chen's profound sword chi. Although it was also dispersed, a third of its power lingered. It continued towards Jian Chen at the same speed as before. Jian Chen had already recovered his mobility after his profound sword chi had collided with the red power. However, at the same time, basically all the power of his soul had been drained from using the 2 strands of profound sword chi. He tottered violently and almost lost his footing. He was unable to dodge the remainder of the incoming attack. He only stabbed at the Wolf King's head as quickly as he could with the startling rainbow sword. Spurt! The sword stabbed through the Wolf King's head and destroyed his soul. Due to it being too forceful, the sword passed through the Wolf King's head and stabbed into the arena heavily, pinning the Wolf King's head to the ground. Crack! The cracks on the sword rapidly expanded, covering the entire weapon very soon. It directly fell apart like that, reduced to fragments. The startling rainbow sword had already been damaged. After the battle this time, it had finally given way, ending its use. At the same time, the power of the bloodline struck Jian Chen. Blood spurted from his mouth on the spot as he was blown away. He collided against the barrier around the arena. The spatial barrier that separated Jian Chen, Kaya, and Chanlong vanished with the Wolf King's death. As soon as the barrier had vanished, Kaya immediately rushed over to Jian Chen. She took out the best healing pill on her and fed it to Jian Chen. Concern filled her face. "Don't worry, I'm fine. I can't die," Jian Chen said weakly. He endured the excruciating pain as he struggled to sit up. Then, he took out a large number of recovery pills from his space ring and ingested them. At the same time, he circulated his chaotic force to heal. The battle against the Wolf King had left him severely injured. Fortunately, he had the support of the chaotic body. Otherwise, he would have died long ago. It would have been impossible for him to last until now. Spurt! Suddenly, Jian Chen vomited another mouthful of blood. His face had already become sheet-white and haggard. His wounds were not the problem. With the recovery rate of his chaotic body, he would be in perfect condition again before long. However, Jian Chen had never thought that when the red light struck him, a portion of its power would linger within him. Even though it was an extremely tiny portion, it was exceedingly powerful. Jian Chen was unable to purge it even when he circulated his chaotic force. He could only surround it temporarily with chaotic force to prevent it from ravaging his body. Is this the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline the captain of the Swords Wolf adventurers mentioned? It really is very powerful. With my current cultivation, there's nothing I can do about it, Jian Chen thought. As soon as he thought about the might that had erupted from the bloodline's power earlier, he felt a lingering sense of fear. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline was simply too powerful. He used both strands of profound sword chi, yet he still lost the upper hand. He was only able to disperse a portion of it and weaken it. Otherwise, if Jian Chen had taken on the entire thing, he would probably be dead even with his chaotic body. Arg! A chilling howl rang out. The last God King of the Swords Wolf adventurers died to Master Chanlong's killing formation. Now, all the experts of the Sword Wolf adventurers were dead. Only a few gods remained. Clearly, Jian Chen could not recover on the arena of life and death, so after barely stabilizing his wounds, he stood up and went to collect the Wolf King's space ring. Afterwards, he arrived before the Wolf King's corpse and stared at the perfect ninth bone sword. He could vaguely sense that the power of the bloodline in the bone sword had not been completely consumed in the attack before. A portion of it still remained. After hesitating slightly, Jian Chen planted a foot on the Wolf King's corpse and gripped the ninth bone sword with one hand. He pulled hard and directly wrenched the bone sword from the Wolf King's corpse. He also collected the Wolf King's monster core before leaving. Kaya and Master Chanlong had taken the space rings of the two God Kings they had just killed. They left the arena with Jian Chen. Among the three God Kings of the Swords Wolf adventurers, only the captain was a magical beast. Naturally, the two elders did not possess monster cores. Only quite a while after the trio had left did a great cry ring out from the observers. At that moment, all the people who had just watched the battle went crazy. They had just witnessed three overgods kill three God Kings in an open battle. To them, this was something of legends. They would never forget this. Afterwards, news of three overgods slaughtering three God Kings in the arena of life and death spread across the entire spatial battleship. It caused a great disturbance. As for the people who caused this disturbance, Jian Chen, Kaya, and Chanlong had already openly claimed the three high-class cabins of the God Kings they had slain. They entered seclusion in their rooms to heal. The three of them had suffered wounds of various severity in the battle this time. Jian Chen had fought against the strongest opponent out of all of them, so he suffered the heaviest injuries. Currently, Jian Chen sat on the jade bed in his luxurious room. His brows were furrowed tightly. He had already tried to eliminate the residual power from the Skywolf's bloodline in his body with chaotic force, but the power was extremely tenacious to his chagrin. Even when he used all the chaotic force in him, he struggled to remove even a tenth of the power. If he allowed the power of the bloodline to linger in his body, it would begin to ravage his body crazily once his chaotic force no longer suppressed it. However, if he constantly surrounded the power with chaotic force to keep it suppressed, it would affect his battle prowess. If he encountered another powerful opponent, he would struggle to use all the strength he had. This matter caused Jian Chen distress. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had already passed since the battle in the arena of life and death. During this time, Jian Chen had already made a full recovery thanks to the unimaginable regeneration of his chaotic body. However, he was unable to remove the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline no matter what he tried. All he could do was leave it inside and suppress it with a portion of his chaotic force. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had already passed since the battle in the arena of life and death. During this time, Jian Chen had already made a full recovery thanks to the unimaginable regeneration of his chaotic body. However, he was unable to remove the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline no matter what he tried. All he could do was leave it inside and suppress it with a portion of his chaotic force. Afterwards, Jian Chen took out the Wolf King's space ring and sent the senses of his soul into it to probe. The space ring was filled with various items. Aside from the basic necessities, there were large amounts of divine crystals and pills, and there were various materials for forging weapons and heavenly resources for refining pills. The space ring contained all the wealth of a God King. Although it was nowhere close to Yashi Lian's wealth, it was still quite impressive to Jian Chen. That's Cloud Curl Stone. There's even essence metal of 5 elements. At this moment, Jian Chen's eyes lit up, and he immediately became elated. He had once again found two materials for forging the twin swords in the Wolf King space ring. Without any hesitation, he immediately took away the Cloud Curl stone and essence metal of 5 elements. There are fewer and fewer materials I need for forging the twin weapons. However, due to the limits of my strength in the past, I was restricted to the region of the divine kingdom of Pingtian, so collecting the materials were naturally difficult. But as my strength increases, I can gradually increase my range of search. I believe it'll become even easier to collect the other materials, Jian Chen thought. He was eager inside, eager to reforge the twin swords. The startling rainbow sword has shattered. I need to find a suitable sword soon, or my battle prowess will be drastically affected. Jian Chen got off the jade bed and made his way out. Kaya and Chanlong stayed in the rooms right next to him. When he opened the door, Jian Chen discovered a black-robed man standing outside. There was the symbol of a spatial battleship on his clothes. Jian Chen understood this person's identity when he saw the symbol. He had learned from Master Chanlong that all the people who wore such attires were a part of the disciplinary team of the battleship. Jian Chen became rather surprised when he saw a member of the disciplinary team standing outside his room. "Sir, the elders have asked for you," the person said at this moment. His face remained emotionless, and his voice was forceful. He seemed cold. Jian Chen hesitated slightly before nodding. "Let me see my friends first, and I'll be right there." The fact that the elders of the spatial battleship wanted to see him did not surprise Jian Chen. At the same time, he did not turn them down. Outer space in the Saints' world was not as calm as it seemed. The dangers that lurked there even surpassed the dangers on land. The spatial battleship would encounter various dangers all the time. Even though the ship was covered with powerful formations, it could not guarantee complete safety. As a result, experts would travel on each spatial battleship to protect it when it moved through outer space. They were paramount existences in the spatial battleship. Others knew them as elders. At the same time, they controlled everything in the spatial battleship. Afterwards, Jian Chen visited Kaya and Chanlong's rooms. He learnt that they were fine before following the black-robed person to the highest floor of the spatial battleship. Jian Chen could not help but think about Master Chanlong along the way. Jian Chen had no idea what Master Chanlong was to him. They were not friends. Strictly speaking, they had even been enemies in the past. However, due to Kaya who was wedged between them, their relationship became extremely confusing. They were originally enemies, but gradually, their grievances for each other seemed to disappear unknowingly. Not to mention that it was Chanlong's assistance that allowed him to board the spatial battleship when Huaiyan was hunting him down. Even though he knew Master Chanlong had done this to save Kaya, he also managed to avoid Huaiyan through this. This made him feel like he owed Master Chanlong a favor. "We're here. The elders are inside. You can go in yourself." At this moment, the black-robed person's voice rang out. He had already arrived on the top floor of the spatial battleship unknowingly. Jian Chen clasped his fist at the person who had brought him here before pushing through the door and entering. As soon as he went in, he discovered 3 old men seated inside. As the old men had all concealed their presences, they seemed to be nothing special in Jian Chen's eyes. However, Jian Chen knew that these 3 seemingly ordinary old men were peak experts who had reached the primordial realm. However, when Jian Chen saw the red-robed old man, his eyes immediately narrowed. He seemed to remember that just when he was about to board the spatial battleship, a red-robed old man had fortunately stopped Huaiyan's attacks towards him. He had stopped Huaiyan, which allowed him and Kaya to enter the spatial battleship safely. Jian Chen immediately understood that the red-robed old man was the same person who had stopped Huaiyan in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Immediately, he clasped his fist and said, "Junior Jian Chen, thanks Senior for saving my life." Hong Emo smiled faintly, "There's no need to thank me. When I interfered before, it was not to save you. Instead, it was because I was tasked with protecting the spatial battleship. Naturally, I can't let any passenger be injured. Otherwise, my dignity would take a hit. Hong Mo paused after reaching there. He studied Jian Chen seriously and praised, "Jian Chen, you are very impressive and extremely outstanding. You've actually managed to defeat a God King Swords Wolf as a late over god, particularly a Swords Wolf that possesses a shred of the ancient Sky Wolf's bloodline. With the power of the ancient Sky Wolf's bloodline, there are very few people that can match up to him at a similar cultivation level. Once he uses that power, even mid-god kings are likely to die, yet you've survived. I never expected that." Jian Chen could not help but become curious about the ancient Sky Wolf, seeing how the power of the bloodline was mentioned again. He asked, "Senior, is the ancient Sky Wolf powerful?" "You don't say." "The bloodline of the ancient Sky Wolf rivals that of the war god from the God clan. It's just slightly worse. Moreover, the ancient Sky Wolf used to be one of the grand exalts of our saints' world. Do you think it's powerful? If it weren't for the fact that the bloodline was very thin, you definitely would not be alive right now." The white-robed old man stared at Jian Chen with some evident annoyance. Jian Chen had cost him an extremely valuable material. It was the main material for forging a god artifact, and he had collected it after great difficulty. In the end, he lost it to Hong Mo through the bet. Jian Chen was astounded. He had never thought that the ancient Sky Wolf used to be a grand exalt of the saints' world. The white-robed old man felt great displeasure towards Jian Chen since he had lost a valuable material. Looking at how astounded Jian Chen had become, he could not help but scoff. "It looks like you don't know what kind of existence a grand exalt is. Allow me to give you, the junior, a proper lesson." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.